You're on the Six Screens Telenetwork, earning the reputation of giving all the right ingredients, uninhibited, in exposing the hard, cold facts about the Watchtower Society.
And now, Disney.
Well, it's so good to see so many people coming into our program tonight. Friends, thank you. It really is, it's encouraging to see people dialing in and wanting to listen into our programs. This is where we talk about what's going on behind the curtains of the Watchtower. We have people calling in. The name of the program tonight is Dick and Constance Borghi Expose the Watchtower. But Constance is under the weather tonight, but we got Dick in with us. So we're looking forward to hear what Dick has to say. So, Dick, you're on with us. How you doing?
Well, I'm doing fine, Rick. I've been enjoying the program all night. And I just want to welcome the audience in. Thank you for tuning in to the Connie and Dick show. And, Watchtower is such a fraud, and we've been talking about it all evening. All the different frauds that they've perpetrated on the people they supposedly love. And it's just really, really terrible. But before I go into the negative stuff, we've got our conference coming up in August, and it seems like it's right around the corner now. I'm down here in South Carolina, and the weather is really warm. Everybody's been in T-shirts for the last month and a half, and it's going to come real fast. So I hope you're making definite plans, and if you need to put money aside, you're doing that, and you're making your reservations and making your plans. It's going to be a wonderful time. I met my wonderful wife, Connie, on Six Screens, and maybe if you're out there and you're single, you might just meet someone. So you can put that on the back burner. Anyway, folks, I'd like to start off just talking about Six Screens just for a moment. This is your program. I've been watching YouTube for now months and months, and I watch all the negative stuff on YouTube about the Jehovah's Witnesses, the frauds that get exposed, that are being exposed, and all hypocrisy. Six Screens has been doing that for 20 years. It has been, talking about the hypocrisy of this organization, and how it's really all about money, and how they cover up pedophilia and so forth. So what I want to get into tonight, and what I'm hoping the audience will be with me on this, is that there's so much fraud in this organization, and I just want to talk about some of the bullet points. But this is your program. Here's your opportunity to call in. If you watch YouTube, those people that do these videos, they're outstanding. You learn a lot. It's really, really good. But this is Six Screens is kind of unique. You all can call up and say whatever you want. I'm just going to throw some bullet points out there and hope that the audience will jump in. Love to have a first-time caller if that's possible. Let's start it off with the founder, C.T. Russell. What kind of a man was he? Well, the Watchtower would have you believe that any negative thing that we say about C.T. Russell is apostate-driven lies. Well, is it a lie that he had a relationship, an extramarital relationship with a 14-year-old woman or girl? That's pedophilia, folks, and that's goes all through the Watchtower to this very day, to this very moment. They oceans and oceans of pedophilia, more so per capita than any other religion in the world. Jehovah's Witnesses is a pedophile paradise. He was also a divorced man. I never knew that, because JW is never going to tell you that kind of stuff. But he was a divorced person, and he was involved in not only sexual scandals, a con game. He was trying to sell miracle wheat, which is supposed to grow bigger and stronger than any other wheat. But if you ate this wheat, you could be protected against cancer and diabetes and a whole myriad of physical problems that you could have. And so he sold miracle wheat. He sold it very expensively. And the JWs bought it and they planted it. Back at the turn of the 19th century, the United States was very rural. There was a lot of farmland out there, and a lot of the people that their job, the livelihood was farming. So that was pretty interesting for a lot of JWs at the turn of the century. Excuse me. What do you folks think about Stephen Lett? He's on the governing body. We've invited him on the Connie and Dick show, but we didn't expect him to show up, and he didn't. But anyway, here's a guy wearing a Masonic signature ring. Can you imagine that? He is involved with another organization, quasi-religious organization that has a real dubious past. And what I've recently learned on YouTube, somebody did a video that he's bought more real estate property, which I find to be very, very interesting. I guess some of these properties have a good price tag to them. Him and his brother and his wife, I guess, they're spending like $800,000 on these homes, waterfront stuff, pretty nice stuff. And when you go to Bethl, you take this vow of poverty. If you're indigent, what are you doing buying a $700,000 house? He's got a couple of them. He's got a few of them out there. Makes you wonder. If you're at Bethl, and let's say you got an inheritance of $1 million from a dead uncle, let's just say, you're supposed to, because you take this vow of poverty and you're working at Bethl, the society expects you to turn that $1 million into the society. So you go to their black hole, which is called worldwide witnessing work. Hey, folks, I don't want to talk all night. *6. If anyone out there wants to, go ahead, please.
Something, if you let me. I don't know if I'm allowed.
You certainly are.
I've never heard of this vow of poverty in Watchtower all the time I was in it, 28 years. But as a Catholic, the nuns took a vow of poverty. I went to grade school with nuns. But the point I have here is that people doing beachfront property, is that what you're talking about? That Brother Plato Face did? Beachfront, is that right? Jeff Bezos did too. He's like the head of Amazon, I believe. And so did Barack Obama up in Massachusetts. And Watchtower, I know for a fact, believes in global warming. It's part of their terrorizing of their parishioners, Their people go to the meetings, And why are you building beachfront property or buying it? Because I thought the oceans are supposed to rise precipitously, like a foot in the next 10 years, See, what you did was very good because you brought evidence to bear that they don't believe what they're teaching. And every time I run into some of these particulars, it just proves they're frauds, as you said when you opened. And that's all I have to say. And by the way, beachfront property is perfectly safe. In fact, Jeff Bezos built it on 2 man-made barrier islands. So if that ain't going to flood first, I don't know what is. We're all being taught so much smack, stupid stuff. You can't hardly sort through it all, but with your own personal experience. And I'll say one more little experience. My brother has a 18-year-old daughter. Last summer, they drove up to Massachusetts. And my daughter said, "Are we going to try to see Plymouth Rock?" And she said, "I don't know if it'll still be there with the ocean rising." Anyway, Plymouth Rock was still there. No ocean rise whatsoever. I mean, that's the kind of hysteria they're putting in your teenagers. Crazy stuff. Just crazy. That's my thought, sir.
Thank you, King of Dots. Appreciate, your little discussion there. And I would just say the same thing goes like we were told that 1975 was going to bring Armageddon, and yet they're doing quick bills, deep into 1975. It didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. And you're right, global warming. I know where Rockabaugh lives. I'm a former Massachusetts guy. And he's on the Cape, and he's got a $13 million home. That's just one of his homes. He's got 2 homes out in Chicago. You wonder where he got that money from. Well, anyway, we're not trying to get political on here, but go ahead.
Can I comment? This is Zachary. I said leave him be, yes. But I wanted to comment. I don't want to introduce disagreement, but that vow poverty, the idea of the vow poverty, I remember hearing about it, someone talking about it on 6 Streams, and I asked, well, wait, I don't remember this vow poverty because of the way it was being described. And then there was another brother, an older brother who had been at Bethl, and he said to me, yeah, you did do a vow of poverty. He said, remember, when it comes to work. And then I immediately remembered. I don't know what documents you may see on the internet, but the vow of poverty specifically meant that you were not supposed to take on additional work. If you took on additional work, like got a side job, if you took on additional work, you could only take on additional work on vacation time. So if you have vacation time, then you could take on additional work on vacation. The way you saw this in practice is Bethelites sometimes, some of them had some real skills, real sellable skills because of what they had learned when they were at Bethl. Sometimes it was laying carpets and that kind of stuff. But when they did work for somebody in a congregation, they could not set a price. If someone paid them, that was okay. They could keep that because they were doing a favor for someone, and then that person chose to pay them. When I went, I remember there was one of the early, what do you call them? In the first week or so, you attend all these little lectures. And one of the lectures, they asked us to put down any stock that we owned and any mutual funds that we had, or that we may have sold. That was in the tax lecture, if I can recall. They never asked me to turn over any money to them. I had worked a little bit. I had worked for a couple of years before I went to Bethl, and whatever I saved up, they never asked me for any of my money. So I think that vow of poverty, in the case of Bethl, it basically meant that you can't do secular work in addition to your Bethl work unless you did it on vacation time. And I submit this to you too. If people had to turn over, some millionaire had to turn, let me say this first. I knew of Bethelites, some Bethelites who came from homes where they had money. And sometimes a grandparent may have left a person, somebody was a beneficiary. They were an heir. And so they were looking for a big chunk at some future date. They viewed themselves as being able to have that at Bethl. I'm talking about informed Bethelites. They never said anything about having to turn it over either. They would feel that, well, it will be pretty nice to have that money living at Bethl because, you don't have a lot of expenses. And the last thing I'll say about that is this. if someone had to turn over $1 million or $1,000 or $2,000, if they had to turn it over to Bethl just because it's in their pocket and they signed a vow of poverty, I think that by now we would have heard it. Now, I've been coming on Six Screens listening in on Six Screens since around 2009, and I have never heard anyone come forward like that. So the vow of poverty, to be accurate, is about work, taking on additional work in addition to a person's Bethl service, like getting a second job to make more money. You can only work when you're on vacation.
Well, I thank you,
Well,
Zach.
Zachary, if they had a trust, they wouldn't have to declare it to anyone.
If there's a trust, and okay, I know the situation where there was I can't remember, remainderment type of thing, where a generation gets the income from the trust, and then the younger people get the corpus, the principle of the trust. I do remember that.
Boston Trust.
And the point is that we're not talking about tax laws. We're talking about Bethl vow of poverty. Do you know you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It's not
I do.
It's not about
and
tax
what
law.
I'm saying is they
I
wouldn't
thought
have
they
to
didn't
declare it
believe
to
in vows.
Bethl. They could have
They
it.
believe in vows.
Wait, say that again. I'm sorry.
They believe in oaths and vows at one time, you know? So when did that start? That's what we did.
Yeah.
I mean,
The only thing what I'm saying is this: the Bethl vow of poverty that a person may sign does not require they turn over their personal money to Bethl. That's my point.
Okay.
To be clear, I think there's no technicalities in that. You know what I mean? That's pretty straightforward.
Say, Zach,
Because I have a lot of questions about that, and you've helped.
Zach, let me ask you a
we
question.
all need help. Hey,
Yeah, folks,
Yeah.
it's my show. Hey, Zach, I got a question. The years you were there, things change at the Watchtower. Their policies change all the time. Their doctrines change all the time. Could it be, and this is a question because I don't have the answer to it, could it be that when you left Bethl, that a new policy came in, and because I saw it on YouTube last week, I think it was, and they were mentioning that Stephen Lett had all this expensive property, and that everyone at Bethl was supposed to be like taking a vow of poverty. Could that have been a new policy after you left?
Well, I don't understand how the fact that Stephen Lett has property, how that affects a person's vow of poverty. There was a, it's coming back.
well, I can add something here. I looked up New York State site for nonprofits, and the
Go ahead, Zach. Please, Zach, finish your thought, please.
I was gonna also say, I remember my first table I sat at when I was at Bethl. There was a brother at that table who they used him in one of the magazines. A sister saw him. This is the way the story goes. A sister saw him, and she wanted to meet him. And okay, I'm trying to think. She was the one with the money, so that doesn't even come into play here because he was the Bethelite. I think it was a sister who had money, so it doesn't. That was the wrong illustration. Again, my point simply is the vow of poverty precludes you from working while you're at Bethl unless you're on vacation.
Well, Zach, I can tell you this. I have an aunt. She just passed a year or two ago. She was a little sister of the Assumption. She was a Catholic nun, and she took a vow of poverty. So I think she said the most money she could have in a month's time with like $50 just for personal items, I guess, your toiletries or whatever. But then again, the Catholic Church supplied her with a house and a car and all that other stuff. So, but she was impoverished. She didn't own anything like Jesus. Jesus didn't own anything. He just, the shirt on his back or the cloak on his back.
Yeah, but that still doesn't, that doesn't, still, that veiled poverty is all about work, not about how much money you may have. If you are a millionaire, or if you are a billionaire, and you go to Bethl, you volunteer to go to Bethl, you're not required to turn a dime over to them. They'll give you your monthly reimbursement. It used to be called an allowance. Now that there could be changes in what they do there, but it used to be called a monthly allowance. And I think for tax purposes, they started to call it a reimbursement, because now it turns into a reimbursement for your expenses rather than revenue. You know, if it's a monthly allowance, it sounds like revenue. If they turn it into a reimbursement, then it becomes a reimbursement for your expenses. So it kind of, if I can remember, there was a period when there was they instituted new policy so that people would save money on taxes. But the sad thing about that is, and it does get pretty vague because it's many years. Your memory fades. It seems like in my first couple of years, we got a 1099, and so we had to pay self-employment tax. So at least you were paying towards Social Security. But I think that once they did that, changed it into a reimbursement, that made it difficult, or that there's no self-employment tax when you're just getting reimbursed for your expenses. That's not good.
Oh, thank you, Zach. I don't want to really belabor this any longer. It's just kind of a small point, but I'm glad you commented on it, because you've been a Bethl. I certainly haven't.
And I do say, you know, policies can change, but I don't see that one. That, you know, that would send Bethl the same way as the rest of the organization. They wouldn't have anybody.
Okay, well, thank you again, Zach.
You are.
How does the audience feel about being told 16 times in the Watchtower literature that Armageddon was going to come in a certain date and it didn't happen? How do you feel about, you know, this nonsense about overlapping generations? Star 6, if anybody wants to comment on that, how do you feel about that? We talk about this a lot on Six Screens, but maybe somebody new or somebody wants to get this off their chest. Star 6. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Brother Borghi, this is Zachary again.
Sure.
How do I feel about that? Look, way back when they used to say the generation that saw the 1914, when they used to say that, it made it seem like Armageddon was coming soon. And then when they started to say that you had to have been 12 years old because you have to understand the differences that happened in 1914, that brought it in even closer. But as time went on, there's a problem with the human lifespan. And so the first thing they did was they talked about features, certain features of the sign, people who saw the features of the sign. And then there was this overlap, which was a later change. I think one was contemporaries. That was the people seeing the features of the sign. That was a major change in the 90s. And then a later one was overlapping. And I think it's It is an attempt to is stretching their doctrine because, as I always say, the end didn't come soon enough.
Well, I thank you for that, Zach. I really do. And that's my understanding too. There was a composite sign, and, you know, it was earthquakes, and you know, people would be lovers of money and all that. But my understanding was that you had to be at the age of discernment. And so you had to be born around 1899, 1900, 1901 to be a teenager in 1914 and have an understanding. I mean, back in 1914, I know they had newspapers, but not everybody got them. In the rural areas, they didn't. You know, TV and radio wasn't out then. So, you know, people were still in the dark about a lot of things that are happening in the world. So when I was doing my math, I was going like 1975. The anointed will still be on the earth when Armageddon comes, but they'll be very, very old men. They'll at least be 75 years old, or maybe older. And you know, they didn't say nothing. This is what I remembered about it. I remember being really anxious that Armageddon was going to start. And I was like, nobody seems to be that excited about it or that apprehensive about it. I can tell you this, being a person that saw combat, when you go out on a patrol, you make sure you have your rifle is clean, you get your ammo, you get your ammunition, you get your helmet on, your flight jet, and you're psyched up about going on a patrol, because you could be killed or there's going to be some action happening. I didn't see that in 1975 in October 7. I got baptized in July of 73, and I just didn't see that apprehension. And as I mentioned earlier on this program, people really didn't believe it. I mean, some JWs certainly believed it. They sold their homes. They bought a mobile home. They went to where the need was great, and they peddled those Watchtower and Awake magazines to try to get Bible studies going and build kingdom halls and all that stuff, because Armageddon was coming, but it didn't come. And then, you know, there was grumblings and people say, hey, you know, the anointed, the anointed aren't the anointed anymore. It's just the governing body is the discreet slave now. They changed that. They changed the Go ahead.
Dick,
Hello?
hello.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, go ahead. Was that Stephen going to talk? Go ahead.
Oh no, it's Maverick here. But go ahead if you want to say something. I can wait.
Okay, thank you. Going to make a quick comment about the overlapping generation. I think it's something we'll all agree on. It was a desperate attempt to hold on to the doctrine of the Gentile times in 1914, and it was so desperate that we look at it and we realize that the doctrine of the generation was changed from its foundation. Its foundation was that anyone around 10 years old that saw the beginning of 1914 would not pass away, that generation. Now, generations overlap. The generations of the anointed remnant, the remnant of the 144,000, they do, in fact, overlap. Generations overlap. But again, what people have to deal with that's in the Watchtower is the fact that the fundamental doctrine was changed to where it's unrecognizable. So therefore, they're describing the generation for all those decades in that description of the 10-year-old that all went away, pretty much. And so it would call into question for someone that's analyzing this the entire doctrine of the Gentile times and its beginning in 1914. Okay, thank you, Dick.
So you got it right. Thank you for the comment. You're right on target with that. It does call in question.
Hi, Dick.
Yes.
Hi, it's Maverick here. Hi, Dick. I hope Connie's well as well. Say hi to her for me. Hope she's doing what she gets. Yeah. I was going to pick up on what the brother just said about and what you mentioned about the fact that 16 times they have pronounced that the end is coming. And I was thinking about this because, yes, it's like those were like, for me, if I were to illustrate this, they were like the big thunderstorm events that pushed people in this heightened expectation. But in between those times, there's been a lot of rain, like sprinkles of the same rhetoric over and over again. And it's almost like it's on a weekly basis. If we remember, as we all do, I find that they're more sinister. Like, yes, if you were around in the late 60s, early 70s, you would have had a heightened expectation of something significant happening in 75. I even have, we've heard, most of us have heard recordings of talks given, really, really strongly suggesting that something's going to happen. And then they turn around and say, no, it was, that was just people getting carried away. Well, no, you said it. Nobody sitting in the Kingdom Hall has any voice to say anything new. They're just hearing things and repeating it. But for me, I find that it's the week in, week out reminders that we're in the last days and that don't invest in yourself. It's not worth it. Don't go to college or don't get a mortgage. Don't get married. Don't start a family. Week in, week out. The little trick, they're like this spirit, like there's this insidious reminders. I find personally, Dick, I don't know if you probably said it's similar. Most of us, I remember the little subtle things. Like, say, for example, I'll give you an example for myself. I tried to educate myself. I mean, I learned a trade. I had an appetite for learning, but my plans were always short term. I didn't think 10 or 20 years ahead. Like, I need to save this much money to put a deposit on a house. And then, I probably want to get married in my 30s. So I need to be set up. No, I was just living from, Armageddon's coming. What's the point in investing in this system? Like the whole Titanic thing. Why are you painting the banisters on the stairs of the Titanic? It's going down. That, I think, probably has more damage to all of us than the big ones, like the 75 ones, although those were pretty bad on their own. I don't know. That was just my thoughts on this, really,
Well, thank you for calling in. And I just want to piggyback on a couple of things that you said. And one thing was that when Armageddon didn't come in 75, and I was really geared up for it, I really was, and nobody said anything. Then a few years later, some of the brothers ran ahead of the organization. That is a bold-faced lie. If you read the Truth Book, it talks about Armageddon. It says there's a definite period when Gentile times would start and when it would end. And it said it will culminate in the year 1975. Absolutely in the Truth Book, the little blue bomb, the truth that leads to everlasting life. Anyone that had any kind of common sense and read that book and changed their life around that book, I did. I absolutely did. Will realize that it wasn't some brothers, that nebulous area of some brothers, ran ahead and started a rumor that Armageddon was coming 75. They had it in print hundreds of times. Thank you for bringing that out. I just wanted to say that. The Watchtower.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. I actually have an audio queued up on my computer of one of the talks in '75. It's only a couple of minutes long. If you want me to play a snippet of it, I can do at some point. It's very, very. I mean, like I was surprised at how direct the talks were, as you said, and in literature of. I thought, wow, that if you were sitting in the Kingdom Hall at that time, you would have been under no other impression that Armageddon is coming. I can't. We can't blame the brothers and sisters. We just listened, and it's how as you just said, Dick. When you hear the current crop of numpties at HQ say, some of the brothers, we formerly believed, we formerly thought this, and it's not, we didn't think anything. We just listened and drank the Kool-Aid. You guys are the ones who formerly thought whatever mumbo jumbo you wanted to think about next, which really significantly affected everyone's life, decisions. Like I always say to people, anybody who's left, sometimes even former ex-witnesses, sometimes without realizing, they minimize the experience we went through. They will say things like, well, you got to move on, Yes, that's true. You can't wallow in self-pity. But I personally will not minimize the impact that this religion has had on my life and my family's life. I won't do it. Although I'm moving forward, it's taken a considerable amount of emotional and financial energy and focus to get my life back on track. I've been out 13 years. I'm still building. There's been very good positive things, and I don't regret for a second leaving, but I won't ever kind of minimize the impact that this place has had, that the religion has had on us. It's huge. And sometimes, unfortunately, people forget that someone else's experience was not yours. It's everything on the spectrum, from walking away and just like nothing's happened to wanting to kill yourself and everything in between. So, it's like I respect where people are. If someone is in that place where they want to rant, good on them, man. Get it out your system. You know what I mean?
Brother, I really, really appreciate what you just said. And it was very, very well said. I can remember at the end of '75 approaching an elder and saying, whatever happened to Armageddon? It's supposed to be here in '75. He said, Brother Borghi, are you serving Jehovah for a date? Well, my whole life changed around that date in my belief that Armageddon was coming. And then he said, well, it's probably a test because, we know when Adam was born. We get the date. I'm thinking, how the hell can you have the date that Adam was born? But, I was naive and gullible, and it's the truth. Yeah. Everything I hear is the truth, But we don't know when Eve was conceived. I was trying to use the word born, I guess, or created by our Heavenly Father. We don't know that, but it's a test from Jehovah, because you count the 0 year from 0 to year 1 as a year, as opposed to counting year 1 to year 2 as a year. So maybe the society is a little bit off, or it's a test from Jehovah. So stay close to the organization. So it's not stay alive to 75, it's stay alive to 76. Yeah. Well, I come from the generation of my time. I got baptized in '91. I was 16 years old, and no background in the Bible or religion, everything secular. My mum was really interested in it. Our life was a bit traumatic. My family life was a bit traumatic at the time, and I just left school, and I was looking at going to college and so on. Just young, barely out of my going into my late teens, early 20s. And '91, the first Gulf War came out, and I was pioneering. And I'm lying in bed. I still remember it, thinking, wow, it's really kicking off now. The Gulf War is going to lead to Armageddon.
thinking, I'm in Jehovah's organization. I'm safe. I'm pioneering. I'm good.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
I'm thinking to myself, what an idiot I was for basically surrendering my entire mindset to them. But I can't, I'm not going to hold that against anybody or myself. That's because we trusted them. And the thing is, I like you said, Dick, I don't want to be taken over the show or anything. I just want to make a couple of points.
You're doing fine.
I remember thinking, well, as you said, before the overlapping generation, in my study, I remember it saying that those who were alive and who were able to understand 1914, the events of 1914, will not pass away until the end comes. That was what is ingrained in us. So we're thinking, well, I can actually work out when the end's going to come. Give or take a few decades, it can't go beyond this point because nobody lives beyond 100, 110, 120 years. That's what we were told over and over again. So how is it now? Oh, conveniently, there's an overlapping generation. When that came out, I went, oh my goodness me. These guys, but then for me, I already worked out that the foundation of all that was on sand anyway, with the 607 stuff anyway. But if we can work out just based on a few dodgy foundation principles, like they're saying that, those who saw stuff in 1914 will not pass away, then you can work out what the end is. So it's not rocket science. A little bit of simple math, you can work out when the end is coming. So why wouldn't the people who were in the middle of that, like when I was there at that point in time, why would I start to think about putting my roots down in this system, as it were? Why? It's like if you go to the doctor for a routine checkup and he says, I'm sorry, sir, but you've only got a week to live. We found something wrong. You're not exactly going to go and get married and start a family, are you? In a week, you will drastically change your outlook and your worldview. So, Watchtower is irreprehensible. They absolutely have no way out of this one. They have destroyed lives, and it's all down to trust. It's like I say to people, it's not about how intelligent or what the facts are. When we start to trust a source as an authority, whether it be politicians or family or cult leaders or whatever, as soon as they grab us and they've got our trust, that's it. They get a hold of us, and that's it. So it's about that's the hardest thing to fight against, really, like knowing what sources are credible and being careful about who we surrender our thoughts to. But there's so many angles we can come at this for. It's a very, very interesting point, because sometimes I think we do think of the big events like the 75s and the 1914s and so on, but it's continual. For me, it's in the fabric of the mindset of the organization's propaganda. It's really always. It's like every week, every time you flick a page of a Watchtower or a new book, there's something in there that's going to remind you that the end is around the corner. And that's why everybody's in that heightened state. You, Dick, more than most people who haven't experienced combat or been in that dangerous environment, my grandfather was in war, and he described to me. In fact, I nearly ended up in the military before. I was thinking of joining the Air Force before I became a witness, because I wanted to learn how to fly. And my mom said, no, because my family, my uncles and some of my family were in the military. My grandfather was, fought in the Second World War, so I kind of admired him for his, and I started asking lots of questions and so on. But what I'm bringing up is that heightened sense of danger must be incredibly difficult to understand if you haven't been in it constantly. Now, I admire and respect anyone who's gone through that. So I just wanted to say that to you, on that score. But it just reminds me of that, we were in that heightened state of constantly never being able to relax and think, I feel safe enough to put roots down in this life. I have to live as if I'm living in a tent, or I've got a go bag, or, funny enough, in the 80s, I was petrified of World War III, nuclear war, Reagan and Gorbachev. We're at, and that propaganda. I'm thinking, what am I bothering to go to school for? What's the point? They can just press the button and that's it. So what we listen to, and now I'm very careful about, I don't put the news on anymore because there's no point. I just find that it just upsets me, stresses me out. And again, the sources, which sources can we rely on, has been incredible. So anyway, I won't ramble anymore.
Thank you. I thank you for your comments. I thought they were, really well done. You brought up a lot of good points, and I just want to piggyback on a few of the things that you said. When you're expecting something traumatic to happen, your anxiety level gets really, really high. It puts stress on your body. Stress is a big killer, psychological killer. It's called psychosomatic because it'll affect every organ in your body if you are stressed out. And one of the cruelties that Watchtower does to its people is it puts you under an enormous amount of stress. I remember going to the Kingdom Hall in Lowell, Massachusetts in 1970 with my sister who was studying with the witnesses. Or it might have been 71, either one of those 2 years. And brother gets on the platform, and he was a big shot elder. He was a person that was the #1 guy in Argentina, I believe it was. He was the head down there. And he came up to the platform, walked up very, very slowly, walked up to the mic, looked to the left, looked to the right, took a deep breath, and he says, "Brothers, what more do you need to know? We just had a big earthquake out in California. I forget the city, San Francisco. A big earthquake out there, and China has just been approved for membership in the United Nations. What more do you need to know?" And everybody goes, it's happening. It's going down right now. It's happening. Armageddon. The point I want you all to realize, because I think a lot of the audience knows that I had suffered from PTSD for a lot of years, and I got a handle on it, about 20 years ago, I guess. But what happens is you're always in a state of anxiety, and that anxiety works into depression, and depression shows itself in drinking, maybe smacking the wife around, or some really negative stuff. You're always, Watchtower either got you guilt-ridden for not going out in field service because you didn't go out in service Saturday, so you're blood guilty for any one of those Jehovah's sheep that you didn't bring into the congregation, so you're blood guilty. And you're also stressed out because you're expecting the world to expecting the world to go really crazy very shortly. Is there going to be electricity? Are people going to come after you? Is Jehovah going to protect you? And one of the things that you said about when you were pioneering and you felt that you were protected, I used to feel that way, that I went to a meeting with elders and servants. At the time I was a servant. And I was thinking, wow, if I become an elder, then, I don't have to do any of the cleaning up the dead bodies after Armageddon. I don't have to do any of I'll be a boss. And that's a lot better than being a nobody, you pick up those dead bodies and so forth. And I felt protected because I just felt at the time that the only people that were going to be protected would be Jehovah's Witnesses. And if I was an elder or a servant, I'm double protected because I've got this anointing by Holy Spirit. Well, one thing I've told the audience 1,000 times on the 20 years I've been on 6 screens, is that I was appointed a ministerial servant and covered up adultery. And then they're going to make me an elder. I turned it down, but, still covering up adultery. So these positions of authority in the kingdom hall or in the governing body does not come from my Heavenly Father's anointing or the Holy Spirit. It comes from, a bunch of elders in your congregation think you're a pretty cool guy and you meet certain criteria, so many hours in field service, so many Bible studies or whatever. And if you meet that criteria and they like you, that's the big thing. If the elders in your congregation like you, then when the circuit overseer gets there, theoretically, they're all supposed to pray together. The Holy Spirit fills the room, and then you get appointed. Well, it doesn't work like that. The elders tell the circuit overseer, "Yeah, we like Dick Borghi. We want him to be an elder." And you're an elder because you play along with the good old boys club. You say the things you're supposed to say and do the things you're supposed to do. And my former wife was very popular, and all the other elders' wives liked her. So that was a big boost for me,
Yeah.
And I had a book study in my house, and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, Dick. You just reminded me that in the last few years I was kind of PMO, I think, by then. I was still kind of coming along to certain meetings, not regularly as I used to, but I would miss meetings and go off and do some reading. One of the books, like Ray Franz's books or something. I just used to extract myself and go and read one of his books, like In Search of Christian Freedom and so on, right? And I remember I found a way of, because it's like, if you speak a certain way, as you just mentioned, you just reminded me, if you speak a certain way, the brothers and sisters leave you alone. Like for example, when it was like the special the auxiliary pioneering month or something like that, and I knew I didn't want to do that because I did it for 2-3 years of regular pioneering when it was 90 hours a month, and I killed myself. I killed myself, do 100 hours a month, 110 hours a month, and I was young, so I was in my 20s, I had the energy. And I think that's what they do. They get us to just bypass our own foundational things you should be doing in your 20s and your 30s to give yourself more stability. And then you can pioneer when you're in your 40s. No, we want your 20s and your 30s. But I used to find that when I spoke, I really love pioneering, but I just can't make it right now. And, I will the next one. But I spoke positively and used all the lingo. I want to pioneer, and they would leave me alone. Just talking about wanting to do spiritual things. Oh, he's really trying that, brother. But if I'd said, I don't feel like pioneering, I've got better things to do, then you're inviting trouble. But the elders in my congregation, they did like me, but they was trying their darn best to get me to become a servant and then an elder, and I just would not do it. I would not do it because I knew that it was as you said, it's a big boys club, and you've got to conform to the will of the personality of that body of elders. And I knew that. I sussed that out, and I just said, nah, I'm not doing this. Won't do it, because I'm not really going to be able to be a real elder by saying, right, this is how I see it in the Bible, I'm going to advise someone. No, you've got to conform to what the official language of the governing, the way, you can't speak from your own understanding as a man. I say man, young, barely a man, in the early 20s. You don't know anything about life. You're going up to a 60-year-old man telling him how to live his life. So I didn't feel like, no, that's not for me. And personally, my family life was very heavy. My father suffered from very, very severe mental illness and trauma, and it was just enough for us to just manage him, me and my mum and my brother. And so I had a full load from a young age to deal with. So I had no extra emotional energy to be worrying about expending myself in the congregation. But the guilt tripping's there always, Dick. As as you mentioned, it's just constant making you feel bad, like you need to be doing more. But I didn't conform. I wasn't that kind of person. That, even as a young man, I would not. Yeah, nobody could make me do anything. Like even when I was at school, you'd have to beat me up if you want to, and force me. But okay, beat me up then. I'm not conforming. If I don't want to do it, I'm not doing it. And that's the way I've always been. So it did help. That part of me helped me survive the kind of intimidation, that subtle kind of browbeating and guilt tripping. But yeah, I'll let somebody else come in and speak now. But thank you so much, Dick. I enjoy the subjects you bring up.
Well, thank you. That was well
Hey,
spoken.
Maverick, before you go, I just wanted to add one thing. This is Stephen Borghi. Wanted to add one thing about 1975. It infuriates me that Watchtower doesn't take responsibility for what happened there, that they actually blame it on the witnesses. We all know what an insular high control group Watchtower is. It would have been impossible for you, me, or anybody else to start propagating some date, maybe in a comment, in a talk, or just talking to friends out in service or at a social setting, for us to be saying, I really think Armageddon is going to come in 1975. Well, why do you think? Well, if that had happened, that would have gone to the elders. They would have pulled us to the side, and ultimately we would have been told to cease and desist going around mentioning some date. If the governing body doesn't mention it, then you don't mention it. We don't go ahead of the society and mention some date. So the fact that they want to try to blame it on the Friends is just such a lie when they know how tightly controlled everything is. Nobody has the liberty to teach anything other than Watchtower wants you to teach. If you do, you'll be disfellowshipped. You'll be marked. You'll be shut down. So it's impossible, even if somebody wanted to. It's impossible. So the fact that they still want to sit there and lie and propagate this idea that this was, as you said, some brothers who came up with this business, but this wasn't from the society. It's such a lie. And I'll give you a quick example. There was a Watchtower article, couldn't have been any more than 10, 12 years ago. It was an actual study article, and it was about how Jesus runs the congregations. And the article made three main points. Jesus runs the congregations. Jesus runs the elders, and that the elders are in charge of the congregation. Now that might, at first glance, sound logical, but it can't be. How can Jesus run the congregation, but then the elders also run the congregation because Jesus runs the elders? It makes no sense, but this is the kind of nonsense that you read in these magazines. This one brother, he raised his hand on this particular paragraph, and this is a brother who is known for giving what they were called extemporaneous comments in your own words. Known for that. He never goes by what's in the paragraph. This particular time, he literally read verbatim what the article said, which is that Jesus runs the congregations, not the elders. For that, about 2 or 3 weeks later, when the what is it called, local needs part came up, an elder gave an entire marking talk against this brother. Everybody knew, he didn't mention his name, but everybody knew who he was talking about. And he said, and in this talk, he said, and some brothers are running around saying that the elders don't run the congregation. The elders run the congregation. And if this is said again, then that brother will be disfellowshipped. This was in a special local needs talk. So this is what would have happened to anybody who went around putting forth some date for Armageddon. So the fact that Watchtower will not accept responsibility for it really shows you the hypocrisy of that organization.
Yeah, they're snilling cowards. They really are. You're exactly right. If you come along and you want to comment on let's say, the United Nations, that the Watchtower 4,000 times in their literature, they said that it was the harlot, the whore, coming out of the ocean, the wild beast, the whole bit, right? and then they join. Then they join the United Nations. So, and it's provable. I mean, it's not apostate-driven lies. If you mention that in the Kingdom Hall, or you mention it on field service or quick field or whatever, you'll be talking to. And if you keep on talking about it, they will disfellowship you for causing divisions. They've done it many times before.
Hey, and this is why this is such a infuriating lie. Because how could all of these congregations all over the world all be under the same idea that 1975 is the year? They're such liars. Because even if it was some isolated group, it would have just been in that little. But every all around the whole world, they're all expecting 1975. Oh, but Watchtower didn't put forth this idea. Come on.
Yeah, that's fine. Absolutely.
It's called propaganda. It's why people ate margarine instead of butter.
Dick, would you permit me quickly to play that 1975 talk, just to get people who've never heard any talks from that time, just for the sake of the audience listeners who may have never heard anything. I've got one queued up here with your permission. No, I can't remember who it was now. It's not the brother Franz, it's another brother from, I've forgotten. I had his name written down, but it's you probably recognize it straight away. Maybe someone can help me with the name of this brother, but it might, I'll play a little snippet. It's only about a minute long, if that's possible.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Play it.
Hopefully everyone can hear it. Okay, let me play it then.
So now, as Jehovah's Witnesses, as runners, even though some of us have become a little weary, it almost seems as though Jehovah has provided meat in due season, because he's held up before all of us a new goal, a new year, something to reach out for, and it just seems it's given all of us so much more energy and power in this final burst of speed to the finish line. And that's the year 1975. As one brother put it, stay alive to 75.
Right, I hope it was clear. I mean, how can you not?
Thank you for that.
How can you not be thinking that Armageddon's coming with that nonsense going on with it? They're so clear.
Brother, I got to tell you, every talk that I heard, and I started going to Kingdom Hall, I was still in uniform in 1970, 71. And every talk, Armageddon. That's all you heard. You know, I mean, you have a talk on a couple of other subjects, but basically, almost every talk that I ever heard in 1970, 1971, 72, in that area, they always directed that conversation or the public talk to Armageddon and how close it is.
Yeah.
Darcy.
Yeah. Hey, I was going to say, listen, in the early 80s, if you folks are hearing me, how they were covering up the 75 prediction by saying that the elders were reading between the lines. That's what I was told. I ain't kidding you. The elders were reading between the lines. That's how some of them covered it up. I mean, that's what I was told.
Who put the lines out there? Who wrote those lines? It's still Watchtower.
Yeah.
No matter how you look
I didn't get it. I didn't get it, sir. Between between the lines. What lines? So
the lines that Watchtower wrote. Those lines.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's so much rumor out there. People say this and the governing body said that, and it changes every single week. But most of my program to see they kind of debunked all that stuff. The Watchtower emphatically stated in print, in writing, in all the conventions, district assemblies, circuit assemblies. You heard it all the time because I was around in 1970, 71, 72. I got baptized in 73. I heard it every time I went to the Kingdom Hall. Armageddon, Armageddon, Armageddon. And then after 75, nobody said anything. There wasn't any articles in the Watchtower about it. There wasn't anything in the Wake. There wasn't any public talks. Public talks went on to talk about different subjects, but he didn't talk about Armageddon. People said, well, where the heck is Armageddon? It's supposed to be here. It's just another false prophet. And you know what happened in Israel?
Hey, Dick, hold on one second. This is Rick Farron at the control panel. Yeah. Hey, Dick, I wanted to come in and say that our telephone lines will be going out here in about 3 or 4 minutes. They only last for 6 hours, so I'm gonna shut it down and then turn it back on again. So you're gonna have to take a break for about 2 minutes, okay?
Sounds good.
Because what happens is it goes on for 6 hours and then it stops working. So I got to reset it. So those listening on YouTube and Facebook right now, just hang in. Dick will be back with his friends, and all those people on the phone line right now, just hang in till we reset it. We'll be all set to go. I just don't want it to go off abruptly and people are wondering what's happening. So we are shutting the program down just temporarily. The phone lines will go out, but they'll be right back on within 2 minutes. So just hang in there. Everybody stay with Dick. We'll be right back. Gonna shut it down right now. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Hold on. Stay with us. We'll get it right here. Sometimes when you're doing this, it brings you right back where you were. Sometimes you gotta do
Welcome to My One Number. Muted.
Okay, I gotta do it by hand here now. Hold on, I'll give it one more shot and then we'll have to do it by hand. See what happens. It's a conference call, it only lasts 6 hours and it shuts down, so we'll be right back.
Please enter your PIN followed by the pound or hash. Thank you. There are 17 participants in the conference. Recording did not start because your storage is full. Please log in and delete recordings or purchase more storage from your account.
Yeah, it says the storage is full, but we don't really need it in there like that. That's why it's full. But anyways, I think we're ready to go. Let's open up the lines here and unmute everybody. Hello?
Yep. Thank you, Rick.
Okay, Dick, you ready to go? You should be all set now, yeah?
Yeah, ready to go. Go ahead, brother. You had a thought about Armageddon and their 16 times that they said it was coming and predicted it and didn't happen, and they just lied and said they never said a word about that. It was those brothers that ran ahead. Go ahead, brother. Was that your thought?
Stephen, I don't know if you are referring to somebody else. I'll just say very quickly, and this kind of goes back to the question you raised at the very beginning, where you asked how did that make us feel. If I had known that, I would have never gotten baptized as a Jehovah's Witness at the age of 13. If I had known that they had predicted Armageddon as recent as 1975 and there was no Armageddon, why in the world would I have joined that organization? I would have never gotten baptized. And since we're on that topic of things that they don't tell you beforehand, even this topic of dysfellowshipping, can you ever remember, Brother Borghi, the topic of dysfellowshipping coming up in any of the publications that a Bible student would go through before they got baptized?
That's a good point. Absolutely not. They said in the Truth Book, and I've read that book a dozen times, if you're in some kind of a serious problem or you find yourself in sin, it gives you an option. You can go to the elders for help, okay? The kind of help you're going to get is they're going to disfellowship you. That's the kind of help you're going to get. Or they're going to humiliate you in front of everybody, you know?
Right.
But the word disfellowship
no help
never appeared in the Truth book and the book that came after that, because the Truth book was heavy 1975. So when 75 didn't come, they came out with the PE book, Paradise Earth book. It's kind of orange, red color. And in that book, the word disfellowshipping never, ever appeared. Didn't appear in the Truth book either. They don't tell you these things till they lock you in. Once you get locked in,
that's exactly right.
And you don't find out till there's an announcement. I'm at the Kingdom Hall and they announce a certain brother at this fellowship. So what the hell's that? I mean, what's this fellowship?
Right.
Nobody can talk to him. He's, you know, he's radioactive. You can't talk to him. Well, we're all sinners. We're all, who isn't a sinner? You know, I mean, and they can disfellowship anybody for anything they want. They can disfellowship you. Well, they disfellowship Rick Farron. Here's the one. An anointed brother who gave public talks was the one of the servants at the halls. He corrected people giving talks. I'm a little congested tonight. You forgive me. Not the liturgy servant. He was the
bookstore.
You know, the overseer, the circuit overseer, the school overseer. I'm sorry.
Okay.
He was all those things, right? And you know, he starts protesting. They pull him in. I think 4 or 5 elders instead of 3 in there, and everything Rick told him was the exact truth. United Nations covering up pedophilia, all that stuff that we've been talking about for years.
Yeah.
And here's an anointed brother. They don't even open with prayer, and they disfellowship him, you know, for telling the truth. He's telling the truth. You know, they did join the United Nations. They do corrupt pedophilia. They do break up families, you know. And these leaders, Russell and Rutherford, especially Rutherford, what a history he had. He had a wife and a mistress. It's quite well documented. But if you would have said
he
that...
He had 2 mistresses and a wife.
Pardon me?
He had 2 mistresses and a wife.
Oh, 2 of them? Oh, well.
Yes. He may have had a third one too, I'm not sure. And his wife was perfectly fine. He tries to say that his wife had this mental condition or this physical condition. Well, after she divorced him, she found somebody else, so she must have been okay.
Yeah. I heard she was some kind of an invalid.
Was he trying to get her institutionalized for being sick? That was one.
Yes, and her health was fine. She married again.
Yeah, this guy was.
He had at least 2 women at Beth Sarim, I think 3.
Well, that's the thing that runs through the Watchtower.
You know,
go ahead, brother.
No, I was just thinking about what were we saying? We were talking about
the
disfellowshipping, and that was we were talking about disfellowshipping very briefly.
Right.
And the reason why this always is such a sore spot for me is my dad was disfellowshipped when I wasn't a baby, but I was a little guy. I mean, little. I don't even think I was in school. I just remember hearing my dad's name being called. And then my mother was crying and people were crying. So I didn't know what. I just had this terrible, you know, feeling in the pit of my stomach until I got home and my dad was there, large as life, like he always was. And so I never really understood what the hell that was about. But then as I started growing up, you know, I had this I guess fear would be the word. My teens all the way into my 20s that I was going to grow up, leave the quote unquote truth like my father and be condemned to, you know, death and blah, blah, blah. Because I was always taught that a person only gets disfellowshipped if they're an unrepentant wrongdoer. Unrepentant wrongdoer. In other words, they just want to be out there doing whatever and they don't care. But as I got older, I began to see you can be disfellowshipped for anything. People were being disfellowshipped for things that are not even in the scriptures. And then Watchtower was just inventing ways to disfellowship, and I think somebody can probably tell us how many rules are in that elder's handbook, majority of which you could probably be disfellowshipped for, none of which are in the scriptures. So even this line that you're only disfellowshipped if you're an unrepentant wrongdoer, that is a bald-faced lie. They will foment any kind of charge against you, and you can be disfellowshipped for anything. Not to mention the fact, as we've already established, that they don't even tell you about this if you're a new Bible student. So this organization just does nothing but lie.
Well, you're exactly correct. And you know what? The
Brother
irony
Borghi, have you read the In God's Love booklet? That's where they have all the dirt after you've been baptized. Then they let you see this book.
What book is that again?
To tell you how loving God is, and it's nothing about that.
Yeah, one of the things that I always find ironic was the fact that they would say Jehovah disciplines those that he loves. So if you are disfellowshipping, that's a loving thing from God. Yeah, it's loving. Your family doesn't talk to you anymore. You probably, if you've been employed by Jehovah's Witnesses, you lose your job. And they can keep you disfellowshipped for years. Look at Larry John Wayne. 3.5 years. All right. I mean, he did something he shouldn't have. He had sex outside of marriage, or I guess he was single at the time. 3.5 years. They kept that stress on him. Because if you believe Armageddon's coming, oh my God, I got to get reinstated, because if I'm disfellowshipped when Armageddon comes, I'm dead. No, paradise earth for me, it's curtains. That PTSD, you don't even know you have it. You don't know you have it.
Yeah.
But it takes the spirit out of you. It takes your happiness is gone. You can't find happiness. I will just tell you a quick story, because I had PTSD from the Vietnam War, and I come home from the war, not a scratch. No, I didn't even. I was one of the very, very fortunate ones, and I'm home safe and sound. Vietnam is 7,000 miles away, and I'm home on leave, and I'm watching TV. And I used to really love Red Skelton. Few folks who are much younger than me, which most of you are. He was a comic. He was very, very funny. And I'm sitting there. When I used to watch him, before I was in the military, I would laugh so hard I'd pee my pants. I thought this guy was absolutely the funniest thing I've ever seen. I'm sitting there watching TV, and Red Skelton's on. I couldn't wait for him to come on. And I couldn't even smile. I couldn't laugh. I couldn't giggle. I couldn't do nothing. My spirit was gone. And the only thing that made me happy was to get drunk.
I know that. Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I mean, what you're explaining right there, I know exactly what you're saying, brother. Exactly. I mean, they take your spirit, they take your emotions, they steal so much from you. When you're disfellowshipped or you're kicked out or what have you, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's almost unbearable. You look at things that you did before in life and you laugh at or enjoy, and it's not there. Nothing's there anymore. I used to sit there and look at a wall, and think, I'm going to die at Armageddon, I'm dead. And it's horrendous what they do to you emotionally. And that's a good testimony with you being in Vietnam and coming back and then dealing with this outfit, with this cult. and going through all that and comparing it with Vietnam, it's amazing.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you. But I think the audience to realize that the Watchtower puts you under enormous stress if you believe the Armageddon is right around the corner. And they preach that. They've been preaching that for over a century now. Armageddon's right around the corner. You know, you got to stay close to the organization. You got to do what the organization says to do. You got to be preaching. You got to be building those kingdom halls. You know, you got to be given every cent you possibly can to the Watchtower for the worldwide witnessing work. You got to be whole soul, and that's what they want. And they are going to abuse you like you wouldn't believe. You know, I'm thinking, I worked real hard. I had a nice house. I had nice cars. I got no happiness. No happiness. The only time, you know, if you're looking for happiness, you have to look for paradise earth to bring happiness. But before you can have happiness, you have to go through the war of Armageddon. And you have to go through some really horrendous stuff. The war of Armageddon was supposed to be so bad that if they didn't cut the day short, no flesh would survive. That's how bad it's supposed to be. And you've got that hanging over your head every single day, and it's reinforced every time you go to the Kingdom Hall. No matter why we get so many JW guys drunk. I worked with elders in a remodeling company. We got drunk. We called it a business meeting.
I hear you.
And I drove home with a pitcher of beer underneath me all the time, and these other elders did too. And if we would have been pulled over, we would have gotten DWIs, I'm sure. But, you know, we didn't, and so that never happened. But you're under stress, and you don't realize why you're not happy. Went out and bought a brand new car in '85, a Trans Am. I've always wanted a Trans Am. I bought it, brand new, ordered from the factory.
Nice.
And you know what? I got no pleasure out of it. I didn't get any happiness out of it. Fixing up an old house, making it look nice, no pleasure out of that. Going to the beach with the kids, no pleasure. I was stressed out. When I was a teenager, life was a ball. It was absolutely fun and games, a lot of good friends, laughing all the time. Nothing bothered me. Now you become a Jehovah's Witness. Well, I'll tell you, brother, you got some problems. And you got to, one thing that I learned when I was a ministerial servant, fellow called me up and said, I'd like to take you on a shepherding call. Okay, you know, I guess, because now they're grooming you to be an elder. So you go to some sister's house, and she's, my husband beats me, he's drunk, you know, we're going to be evicted. That's none of my business. I mean, not only did I have stress, you know, of paying my bills, having my children clothed and all the things you have to do with kids, I was stressed there. Now I got to take the stress that this woman had. I'm not surprised why some of these elders go nuts. Some of them quit, or some of them become really bitter. This Watchtower is a real travesty for your psychology. Absolutely is. Star 6, anyone with a comment?
You know, that last thing you said, you're not surprised that some of the elders, I forget the exact words you said. I don't want to say the wrong word right there. But they kind of go off. It can be a constant thing. I remember there was a very nice sister. We didn't know her. She came to our hall from another state. And, you know, when I talk about this stuff, I try not to divulge too much information that would make it, if a person's listening and they hear their own stuff, so it does bother me to talk sometimes. But the sister was having I think her mother just died, and now she had her mother's house, and other things were going on, and I think that she felt like the house was demonized because this happened and that happened, all these little things happened. And then she mentioned something about her health, and it was, one thing, a lot of things. And so that was when we first met her. But you know what happened? That sister would be waiting. Like you're the one saying the closing prayer, or you're on the platform at the end of the meeting, that sister was waiting about 7 feet from the platform to catch you. And then it would be that kind of, this is going wrong and that's wrong and this is wrong and that's wrong. And that being on that side of it, hearing that constantly can be draining, and it's just not a good thing. So like I said, I think I said earlier tonight, that the constant meeting parts and field service, and then hearing those kinds of things constantly, that really does get you, brings you down kind of. Well, it sure does. Mm-hmm. Can I say something about that?
It must bring you elders down. Sorry, Zach, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Because it's on topic. Go ahead.
I'm going to be very brief, Zach. What I was going to say is I can't imagine you guys the job you had when, even if you wanted to assist, and I'm sure some did and I'm sure some didn't, you're probably hamstrung by Watchtower policies. Because I remember talking to a brother once, this was years ago, about a thing, and he told me, he said, all that we can do, all the society tells us that we can do is X, Y, and Z. And so my point is that must be so frustrating. Even if you wanted to do certain things, you're hamstrung because Watchtower says not to do this, that, and the other thing. Just like this business with not calling the police if somebody tells you that they were molested. That's Watchtower's policy. What if you decided, no, I want to call the police. I think this is wrong. I think the right thing to do is call the police. And if you do, you'll probably find yourself being not an elder anymore. So I just, that on top of, like you said, all of these things that are put upon you. But then even if you want to do something, you're hamstrung by Watchtower policy.
Stefan,
and that policy
exactly.
changed, brother, in 1973. That's they brought the elders in. That's when they had so much policy that they couldn't call the police or they couldn't truly help others, and it changed everything, as Brother Borghi noted.
There was another thing that had happened. Now, I didn't feel hamstrung in these cases that I'm talking about. So I'm not making that claim on myself. There was another thing that happened where I was studying with a young brother in the congregation. He was about 20 years old, maybe. And so he could have been 19, right in that age. He was living at home, and I remember getting a phone call at about 2:00 in the morning. And I lived across town from where my hall was and where they lived. And I had to get in the car, drive all the way across town, because they said, oh, the mother said that she's having a problem with him. And since I study with him, she thinks I should know. So it was about 2 a.m., as I said, and I had to go all the way across town. And when I came in the house, nothing horrific, but the positions of everybody. This sister who had become a widow, she was on the steps with her kids surrounding her, and her son was standing in the middle of the living room. And, they were at the steps, and what I read was, oh, these are like, it's like battle lines are drawn here where he's being blocked. He can't go upstairs. And so when the conversation went on, that's exactly what was going on. The sister was not allowing him to come. She didn't want him in the house because he didn't obey curfew or something. And so, and her son wasn't violent or any, you know. And so she finally, I talked and said, what about this? What about that? And so she did let him come in and go upstairs. But to me, that it feels like really 2 a.m. and I had to work the next day. 2 a.m. I get a call. I live way across town, and the thing that's going on is this sister saying he can't come in because he didn't obey curfew. But she did, after we talked, she let him come in. I wanted to say something about the 1975. What happened after the 1975, after the what would you call it? The nothing event in 1975? I think that the
Great Disappointment.
Yes. I think that next 2.0. The great nothing. I think that what happened was that next year, service year, was the first time they had a drop in activity. You know how they used to.
I can imagine.
They had a drop in activity.
We used to have charts.
Yeah, and the friends probably said, okay, this is enough. And it did affect people because some people were coming in because, you know, they thought the end was going to be there. So.
Right. Does anybody remember the name of that book that kind of chronicles a couple cults, and when those cults predicted their own version of Armageddon and it didn't happen, and they thought it would be the death of the cult, but in reality, the cult was actually able to keep going. Does anybody remember those books?
Kingdom of the Cults. I think that book you're referring to is Kingdom of the Cults.
You know, I thought about that too, but I'm not sure that's the one. I'm not sure that's the one.
The YouTube video called The Great Disappointment about 1880 or whatever, that is a wonderful video.
Yeah.
And 1844, William Miller.
And those written accounts sound just like ex-witnesses.
All I know
they're all the
same. Is when they come up with a generation after about within 5 years of the 75 prediction, they come up with a generation prophecy. Live forever on paradise earth. That book, and it was unreal. And earlier, folks, I was told that between the lines,
You're breaking up, brother. Can you get a little closer to your mouthpiece?
Reading in between the lines, I go, I bought it, but anyway. Go ahead.
All right. Anybody else? Star 6? How do you feel about
I think the name of that book. I think the name of that book is When Prophecy Fails. I think that's the one.
Okay.
About the UFO.
I'm sure there's a lot of books out like
when
that.
Prophecy Fails. The reason why
this week that you might want to read. The book that you might want to read, this might interest you.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Terror, Love, and Brainwashing by Stein.
Right. Yep. The only reason why I brought up what I brought up, the book When Prophecy Fails, is if we ever want to know what would happen if Watchtower would double down on some date again for Armageddon. Like I think somewhere in one of the programs tonight, somebody mentioned, oh, they might have some new information. But let's say that they did. Let's say that they doubled down and they said, 2035 is going to be the year. And we know Armageddon's not coming in 2035. They don't have any special knowledge from God because they're not inspired by God. So the question would then be, what would happen? Well, if we take what happened already in 1975, plus what happened with these other cults in books like When Prophecy Fails, two things will happen. One is there'll be a big number of people that leave, 1/3, 1/2, who could predict, but for sure a number of people will leave. But as this book, When Prophecy Fails, shows, the cult will continue to survive. They'll rationalize some explanation about they got the date wrong, same thing they've been doing, Watchtower's been doing, and the cult will continue just in a smaller format. That's why that book is so important.
Excellent. And the name of the book again, in case somebody missed it, can we get the name of the book again?
It's When Prophecy Fails, and it's about an American UFO cult, and it's back in the 50s.
Okay.
But it's really interesting. The psychology behind it is really interesting.
Thank you for bringing that forward. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you say something, Kirk?
I was just going to pick up on something you were saying. That I can actually imagine Watchtower, if they're listening. I'm going to give them ideas now, but I'm going to go for it anyway. I can imagine them being crazy enough to say, you know what, we got 607 wrong. It was 587, actually, not 607 BCE, when Gentile times ended, which means the end of Gentile times was 1934, and look what happened in 1935. Rutherford, the Jehovah's Witnesses was born, and that's the real date, and we can extend it forward and all, and come up with some radically crazy thing in order to I can imagine them doing it. They will, at some point they're going to do it again. They can't help themselves. And this just goes back to the fact that really and truly, Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists, and all the other branches that came from the Millerite movement have just stubbornly stuck to trying to kill, the same tradition, the same faulty foundation they all started from for the 1844 Great Disappointment, as we mentioned just now. Nothing's changed. They are from their mother, which is the Millerite Adventist movement, and it's just like they've decided to go down this freeway, and they're in that direction. Yes, there's lots of roads that lead off from there, but they're still on that main artery going in that direction, which is anywhere near what the Bible says and so on. So I can imagine them reinventing themselves over and over again. And then what they're relying on is the rank and file, even now, even more than our time when we were there. They don't have an iota of energy left in them to really dig deep and look at things properly. The articles are so lightweight by design to create a dumbing down and just focus on today, just focus on what we're doing in this article next week, all the light stuff, and then no one can join the dots anymore. They don't have the capacity to join dots. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. I was thinking about the fact that you just brought something that's always uppermost in my mind. How this so-called spiritual food has just gone what I call to spiritual puree. Just boiled down to nothing. Do you remember when we were active witnesses, we used to be told that we were the most educated people on the planet? That if you read the Watchtower and more so the Awake magazine, and you kept up with that it was like getting a college education. Well, let me tell you something. When I got to college kicked my ass. I read every Awake magazine. I was one of those diligent people that actually read all that garbage. And went out to service, and I was very knowledgeable. Yes, sir.
When I absolutely devoured Carl Olaf Johnson's book, I was humbled.
Yep.
And I went, wow.
Yes.
There is a PhD level historical and archaeological scholar. And I learned from the process. Yeah, the process of going through that book. I now know how to study archaeology and how to look at what absolute dates are and the Neo-Babylonian thing. It's just a process. You learn the process. It's not, you don't have to be, it's not a measure of intelligence. It's just going through the process. If you follow the same measurements that they do, look at the same documents they do, that he did, you will get to the same answer. And that, as you said, that taught me how to study, that book. And I spent a year and a half of proper examining that book. And I would miss the Sunday meetings, go into the park or go by, somewhere where no one would notice where I am, and just enjoy just digesting it and enjoy that.
You were so hungry. You were so. Yeah. Were you not just hungry intellectually? Because we have been imagine if somebody was just eating, almost next to nothing, and then finally somebody says, "Here's a spread of food. Eat as much as you want." They would devour it. That's exactly how I felt. I was the same way as you. I think I had already stopped going to meetings by that point, but I must have read Gentile Times considered 3 times back to back. And the first time I began reading it, and you tell me if you had the same observation, the thing that struck me right away was how scholarly it was. Yeah. And the fact that it had all the bibliography and all the footnotes, and you can go and read. We would probably still be reading if we were going back and actually reading every source that he quoted from. And instantly my brain said to me, "You've been tricked. You've been deceived. Watchtower is not scholarly at all. They're not even attempting to be scholarly. They're not.
Do you want to hear
They're preaching their narrative." And I was done with Watchtower right there. Yeah.
Do you want to hear a really funny story about the whole Carl Olaf Johnson's book when I was studying?
Absolutely.
I live in London, so I'm about 4 miles away from the British Museum. Yeah. So I would go there regularly. Yes, I'm very close to the British Museum.
Wow.
And so I would go there, and I am.
Wait a minute. You can't just say I live 4 blocks from the British Museum and just keep going like that's nothing. That's incredible. Are you kidding me? Oh my God, that's exciting. I would live in that place. Okay, I'm sorry. Keep going.
Go ahead, brother. I think you stole his thunder.
Oh no, I didn't mean to. Remember?
No, I just got. Hello. I just got cut. It's just shut down for some reason. Yeah. I'm about 4 miles away from the British Museum. I live in central London. I live in North London, so I can. It's very close. It's very easy to get to. Yeah, go on. You were going to say something.
Oh, yeah. That's just like living across the street from Disneyland to me. That's
well, that's it. I mean, guess look at the irony. I'm in the British Museum, and I would go there regularly when I got a chance to go. And I had my Carl Olaf Johnson's book, and I'm checking the reference. And that particular period, they had a special section for the Neo-Babylonian cuneiform tablets, talking about 587. And I'm like, oh my goodness me, I've got photographs of it. Maybe I'll get a chance to send it to Rick if you guys want them. I have to find them. But anyway, guess who was there while I am at the window with these cuneiform tablets? A Bible in London. They would do a Bible. I don't know if they do this in America or places, but in London there were tours arranged by the society and they would do a talk using references in museums, and they were talking about 607, and there's a whole pile of witnesses, and I'm not wearing any. I'm wearing normal clothes, casual clothes, and I'm thinking, do I know anyone in that crowd there? And the brother was talking about, and this is where we get 607. I'm like, you lot don't. I just felt like just busting his show. But I thought, leave it alone. Let them do their thing. It was so ironic
You
that I'm
should
actually
have.
looking.
You should have.
Yeah.
That is so crazy because I was there on my honeymoon, and that tour group came through, and I was right there where they have the those big creatures from Iran, and they have that gate there, and then they're talking about Lekash, and they have a tour there, and then I go like 4 or 5 steps away, and it's the size of a pizza box in bronze with the correct date on it.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm telling you, Maverick, if you had busted that up, if you had busted that lie up, I guarantee you at least one person would have probably eventually woken up.
I do feel bad about that. When I think about it, I should have, There's a lot of things I should have done. You know what?
You didn't go time. Don't worry about it.
You know what? I really wanted yeah. No, sorry. I was going to say, you know what I wanted to do actually in my Kingdom Hall, because the carts were just a new thing when I was left. It was just not that long. I felt like doing my own carts and literally stubbornly, outside my Kingdom Hall with all the apostate literature, and it's in public land, so they can't tell me to move. It's on where I would still stand. It would not be like they legally can't touch me. So I'd stand there and wait for all the people I know and smile at them as they're going in and just say, would you have a look at this and have a look at this? They'd have to go in blindfolded not to see me, because there's only one pathway to the Kingdom Hall I used to go to. You can't get. I was radical. I just thought I need to calm down. I need to gain my emotions first, and then because you end up. We were raw, very raw, very, very raw when we leave, and I just thought I needed to just focus on myself, get myself to balance first before I can help anyone properly. Yeah. British Museum, it's one of my favorite places in the world.
I'll tell you, I don't have anything anywhere near the British Museum in America that I know of, but in Illinois, in Chicago specifically, on the University of Chicago campus, they had what used to be called the Oriental Institute. They've changed the name now.
It's beautiful there in Chicago.
Politically correct. However, in ancient days, the Orient was not Asia, the way we consider Orient now. It was what I'll just say was the Middle East. So there's nothing about China, Japan, or anything like that when you go there. But it's the closest thing we probably have to some of the artifacts that you have there. And I had been there a number of times, and I kept telling our book study overseer, let's plan a trip. And I was finally able to talk him to it. So one day after service, we all raced home and changed clothes, and we all went to the Oriental Institute. And we did have a tour guide who was not a witness. And what she would do is, as we would get to certain exhibits, she would have us turn in our Bibles. And of course, the Watchtower Bible was a little bit off, but we figured we'd be in the ballpark, and we'd have to nail down a specific verse that was different from what she had. And you would read that. And then she would say, okay, you see where it talks about thus and so in this scripture? Yes. Okay. And then she'd turn and she'd point to an exhibit, and it was either the actual exhibit or a replica of it. So it just took all of that stuff that seems to be so ancient and so distant and just kind of brought it right to your face. It was amazing. And that's the kind of stuff Watchtower should be doing, but they can't because they've lied about all these dates for so long, so they can't. That's why I said they're just painting into a no-win situation, and it's their own fault. And
they'll do anything to hold on to their reward now. They're getting their reward in full. That's what Christ said. Yeah. Whether people are believers or not in our community, some people don't. But he said it. He said they are getting they're just Pharisees. We know they're Pharisees. Their reward is now.
Yeah. Modern day Pharisees. Totally.
2 minutes of fame.
And I'll tell you one other thing before I forget, since we're on this topic. The thing that also blew me away, if anybody else ever does get a chance to go there, if you go downstairs to where like the bathrooms are, nursing stations and all that, they have actual black and white photos from when these discoveries were made all along the walls as you go up and down the stairs. So not only do you have the actual exhibits, but you can actually see the archaeologists and all the aides and stuff out there in the Middle East as they find these things on their hands and knees, brushing things, and then you see the thing get pulled out of the ground, and then you see it get transported, over the ocean and brought to America. The whole thing is just fascinating.
The thing that got me, I don't want to take over. Like, I don't know if Dick has a focus he wants to talk about tonight. Though.
You're doing fine. You're doing fine.
I was just going to say the thing that was interesting about like the research. 2011, my mind, the 607 stuff, the Gentile times and everything, and the landing on 1914 was kind of always in the back of my mind since my study, and I never felt I could really, I could explain the Watchtower's explanation, how we get to 1914, no problem. It was just based on trust, like, okay, they know more than me. What do I know? They've got people who study and articles and all that. And I just gave them this mysterious place called Bethl in New York. That's where it all happens. And I don't have a way of referencing anything. So that's where but if someone asks me, how do we get to 1914? I can step them through the process of how we get to 1914. But when I read Carl Olaf Johnson's book, and he said, to just give an example for anyone who's never looked at this book before, he said, here's a Babylonian astronomy document. And so the Babylonians would just have a map and say, okay, on the April the 10th, if you look in this part of the sky in Babylon, you will see the moon on the left, you'll see Saturn on the right, you'll see below there will be another planet and this constellation, and it will describe the sky. So when I went, all I did was follow Carl Olaf Johnson's guide in his book and say, okay, let me go on an astronomy program on the computer, type in 587, and what would the sky look like in the year 587? Boom, check it against the document, it's exactly the same. You type in 607, completely different. So the stars in the heavens, the ancient documents are proving that it's impossible for that date to be correct. I went, oh my goodness me. I have absolutely 1,000,000% proof now. And this religion, I'm done. And I have no fear. I don't care about them anymore. They are charlatans, liars, and they don't deserve any respect to be called even. They're not even, you can't even call them a religion. They're complete and utter charlatans, and I have zero respect for them. So when the elders came round to my door, I was putting the bins out. Oh, yeah, we need to meet up with you and with a few elders. I said, you're not my elders anymore. You're not elders. You're police. You're Gestapo for the organization. He didn't know where to put his face. You know? I said, you're not elders. You're not my elders. He didn't know what to do. I said, you haven't seen me for 2 years, and then the first thing you're going to say to me is, oh, we need to have 2 elders come round and speak to you. I said, no, I put my form in 2 years ago. And I told you on the form, I do not wish to be approached afterwards in the guise of, we love you. Just leave me alone. I don't have nothing to do with this organization. I put my letter in and that's it. So anyway, yeah. But it's a very good book.
Can I ask you guys a question?
Yeah.
Do you mind? Oh, you guys are so smart. I'm not even anywhere near. I used to live in Chicago, and the Oriental Museum is wonderful. But now that we have AI, and you're talking about these dates that are irrefutable with AI, what is the society going to do? Anyone could look up that information on their phone and get that and get it. What can the society do about it now?
That's going to be every individual that looks that up. Because I told people this. I had the person that introduced my parents to the witnesses, their daughter, who's older than me. And I said this to her in a conversation because she said, I heard you don't go to meetings anymore. She called me. She lives in Atlanta. And I said, yeah. And she said, well, why? What happened? And I told her, and I said, this whole business of 1914 and this and that, and I ran it all down. She was, of course, very familiar. And I said, yeah, but that's all based on this date of 607 BCE. And I said, and I'm telling you, I've done extensive research and you won't find one single historian who tells you that Babylon destroyed Israel in 607 BCE. It's 587/586. You'll find a handful of 590s. And her reaction was kind of like, who cares and what difference does it make?
That's the reaction. That's the reaction I got too.
Understand, this date is the date that Watchtower puts forth. It builds its whole biblical chronology on this date. What do you mean, who cares? What do you mean, what difference does it make?
It's the foundation of the religion.
Everything.
It's absolutely.
If that's the foundation of the religion. Unless if that date is wrong, this whole chronology and who, when was he anointed and when did they start? Whatever you want to look at, all of that is wrong because it all hinges on this date. What do you mean? What difference does it make?
Stefan, I dare anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I dare anybody to type in 1919 now in the current jw.org website and the library. They still go to it every time. 1919, 1919, 1919. Why? Because they need to reinforce their authority when they feel too.
Lie. Yeah. And there was a talk given by, I think it was Jeffrey Jackson, not too long ago, where he there again mentioned 607 BCE. And I'm thinking to myself, they are still teaching this nonsense, and they know darn well that it's wrong. Because that was one of the things that I was thinking as I was reading Carl Olofsson's book is, does the society know this date is wrong? And then, of course, as you start reading the book, you see that he was interfacing with the society, sending them documents that ultimately is what turned into this book. Showing
Stefan, do you know?
There was a story about Freddie Franz. There was a story about Freddie Franz, and some brother higher up says to Freddie something about, we know the date is wrong, and Freddie's like, yeah, but millions of people believe us.
Yes.
So they know that what they're teaching is because they say it is.
Yep, I remember that.
Right. You're so right. It's like Jehovah or Yahweh, they know it's Yahweh, it's not Jehovah, but they've been using it for a century now, so they're going to stay with it, even though they know it's wrong.
Yeah.
Well, what's happening now is they're plugged into their phones. They don't even have Bibles. They don't even bring a Bible with them. They're hardly bringing a songbook because they put it on the screen. And the young people think it's okay because it's a wholesome social club for them. But it's not people studying scriptures anymore.
Not at all. Nope.
In 2011,
Watchtower does not teach truth. Watchtower teaches a narrative. And all of these videos and all this business is to reinforce this narrative. I just want to say one thing real quick.
Well,
matter if you take it. When you go and you read Raymond Franz's book, I believe it's Christ is the Conscience, because I haven't read the other one. He talks about the fact that he had communicated with the writer of the Gentile Times Revisited, Carl Olaf Johnson. And
he helped him, actually.
He helped him. And in the Age of Bible Understanding, he being Ray Franz, put in there that 607 BCE was a year, knowing that it was wrong. And you could tell that he was both embarrassed and hurt at his cowardice for not standing up for what was right at that point. Ultimately, we know he did, and he left Watchtower, the rest is history. But he makes the point that I did not notice. If you go and you read the successor to the Aid to Bible Understanding, which is that 2-volume work, Insight on the Scriptures, it does not say in the Insight on the Scriptures that Israel was destroyed in 607 BCE. It does not say it. It refers to it, it infers it, and it tries to counter arguments against that date, but it doesn't explicitly say that date because Watchtower knows it's wrong.
Yep. And they're scared that they actually go. Very good point, Stefan. And I just want to end on this point because I'm not going to be on too long anymore. But what you just said is interesting. The reason why my attention was brought back to this subject was back in 2011. Watchtower attempted to do a rebuttal on this 607 to defend it. It was 2 articles, a part 1 and a part 2, if anyone's interested in looking this up for themselves. It was October and
2011?
November 2011. Yes. So I got hold of this. I thought, whoa, Watchtower's actually trying to defend this with in a scholarly way. Oh, it got my attention. I started to go through it. I was still a witness by then, but I was kind of waking up a little bit too. So I attempted to look at these two articles. Could I make head or tail of it? No, it was so difficult to understand. No references as usual. Guess what though? Lo and behold, when I went and looked at Carl Olaf Johnson's book the year later, when I discovered his book about a year later, I thought, oh my goodness me, Watchtower's attempting to do a rebuttal on Carl Olaf behind the scenes. It's a reaction to Carl Olaf Johnson's books. Yeah, and I thought, oh my goodness me. So they damn well know that book inside out. They know it inside out.
They know.
And so
See,
I thought,
I can give them a little bit of license if they didn't know. I can give you a little bit of license if you honestly didn't know. You were speaking from a position of ignorance. You really believe what you were saying. They know that this is a lie. Go ahead.
No, that's the same point I think. So they don't realize that there are people who are interested in these subjects. So now I think they're to answer. Is it Susan who just asked that question about what do they do now with AI? The only defense they have is to be the gatekeeper of knowledge, and they use fear. They use fear. They're gatekeepers. That's the only thing they can do. They draw all the rhetoric and all the propaganda and all the psychological psyop is to get brothers and sisters, or former brothers and sisters, witnesses, rank and file, to just be so scared to investigate. But once a person's saying, you know what, no, I have a right to look into these things, the bubble will be burst. The red pill, that's it.
Yeah,
it's not going back.
And that's it. See,
the only defense I have.
Does the society say you cannot use AI?
Go ahead, Sue. Please.
Does the society say you cannot use AI now that they use computer?
I don't know.
Because I
you can't get away from AI if you wanted to. It's built into just about everything now. Your website.
So they couldn't say.
You call a 1-800 number. You're actually talking to AI. There's 5 or 6 prompts into it before you might get a human being. So you can't get away from AI if you wanted to.
So they're
it's just built into everything.
They're just relying on scary.
See what Watchtower does, and this is what Maverick is saying. What Watchtower does is they attack. If anybody says that it's not that date, they try to attack. Oh, they're saying that because they don't want you to know the truth. They're saying that because they're working for the demons and whatever. They know that it's just like in the judicial system. If you can't disprove what another person is saying, then you attack that person. You attack that person's character.
Ad hominem.
This is what they do. And this is the same thing that Ray Franz said. They know it's true. So what they did in the Insight on the Scriptures, if you go and you read that, they try to attack the claims by those that it's not 607, without saying that, yes, in fact, it was 607. This is how devious in this organization is. They will stoop to no level. And when you talk about a rebuttal of something, this is what I commented on earlier when Brother Farron mentioned this puff piece about the attorney, the head attorney, whatever his name is. The only reason why Watchtower put that puff piece out is because the witnesses are starting to hear from us how corrupt that attorney is. And now he had been fined for lying. So to counteract that, Watchtower puts out this puff piece. So now when a Watchtower witness reads that, and then they'll say, oh no, that's just an apostate lie. That's just the devil and the demons and his henchmen trying to attack God's people. Oh no, we already read about him. We know what a faithful worshiper of Jehovah he is. That's why they wrote that article. It's the same approach.
I'm surprised he didn't get disbarred.
I don't think you'd have any attorneys if you're going to disbar all of them for lying. I don't think you'd have any.
Good point.
Be nobody in the courtroom.
Star 6. Anybody want to make a few comments? We got a few minutes left.
Now that gentleman from England, yeah, he was talking about 1844, and yeah, that's when all this crap started. That's where Watchtower stemmed off from.
Yep. The foundation, huh?
Oh, the Miller movement? Is that what you're referring to?
Millerite movement.
Yeah.
Yeah. People were standing on top of mountains and hilltops and barns and everything else. You know, they even predicted a certain date in 1840. Yep.
Well, he's got to see himself as a prophet. And, you know, look at me, I'm a prophet. You do what I tell you to do, and because I'm getting it right from my Heavenly Father. You just listen to me, I'm smart. And then, you know, those prophecies that don't happen. Another thing that I see, you know, in these cults, is prophecies don't come to fruition, and there's a lot of money involved, and there's a lot of sex involved, improper sex, you know, children, that type of stuff. That seems to be the hallmark of these cults.
I've seen a lot of it, yeah.
Like the title of this book said, Terror, Love, and Brainwashing. And it's all about cults, and it's about totalitarianism, and it's by Stein. But it's terror, love, and brainwashing. So they play on fear. They want you afraid all the time.
They do. If you're not happy, you've got to really look into the reasons why you're not happy. It's not because you don't have a good date or a beautiful home. If you're not happy, you don't have a really good relationship with Jesus Christ, our Heavenly Father, and the Holy Spirit. If you're not happy, that's just my little.
Well, you know, little children, when you were an officer in your uniform there at the Kingdom Hall, you had PTSD, but you were an adult in the Kingdom Hall. Imagine if you were a small child. It gives little children PTSD.
Yes, it does.
Because
it absolutely
they're expected
does.
to jump through hoops, and their nervous system isn't even ready for it.
That's right. And if you miss a meeting, you know, God, you know, that could be your life. You know, the Watchtower will tell you that they're not inspired. Then out of the same breath, they'll tell you that if you don't, you know, you have to follow them like your life depends upon it, because it does. But your life depends
But
upon
it doesn't.
Of course it doesn't. You know, it's a false prophet. You know, they were stoned in ancient Israel. You prophesied in God's name and it didn't come true. They took you out in the back and stoned you to death.
Hey, Dick, do you want to hear something ironic? Would you like? I've got it right in front of me. I've got a 1935 transcript of Judge Rather Fraud, I call him, and he's trying to attack the Catholic Church, right? But listen to how crazy this is. He says, a doctrine taught by a man and handed down by oral delivery from ancestors to posterity is called tradition. For centuries, men have promulgated traditional theories and the common people have accepted them as true. And this is his reasons why people accepted something to be true when it's just a tradition. Because the men teaching such tradition occupy positions high among the people. For this reason, the confidence of the people is easily gained, and they are likewise easily imposed upon. Can you believe the?
Yeah, you know, I believe that so much. You know, if somebody has a college degree, a PhD or a doctorate or whatever, you know, oh wow, he's got a doctorate's degree. He's got to be really smart. He's got to, you know. That's not necessarily the case. These college professors now are messing up the young people's minds really, really bad in college. And these high school teachers telling kids that, you know, well, if you think you're a boy, but you're a girl, you do something about it. It's crazy the stuff that they're teaching people today.
Yeah. That quote, all that stuff I just read is from the website that I mentioned on Rick's the news earlier. It's from a website called Watchtower Way Back, all one word, watchtowerwayback.org. I mean, it's a gold mine. About 64 of Rutherford's early talks that were on record, that they were on the phonographs that would take to the doors. They're all there. I'm going through them. It's very, very interesting. It's just really incredible. So watchtowerwayback.org in the library. It's all there. Audio and documents.
I think that's outstanding that it's there and you can access it, because what the Watchtower is doing now at the Kingdom Halls, I think it was from 1985 back to C.T. Russell's time. If there's any books there, from 1985 to 1890, something like that, they want them all destroyed. Yep, it's covering evidence. Think about it. If you had a document that, like, say, the Constitution or the Bill of Rights or Declaration of Independence, Magna Carta. Sorry, I'm congested tonight. The British Constitution, Magna Carta. If you had documents that are of that, if the original documents are in lock and key, they're in like Fort Knox in a special room and all this stuff. I mean, these are documents written by men. Now, the Watchtower claims that all the books that they've been written have been written under inspiration, and the reason they're destroying them is because there's so many false prophecies in there, so many things that are ridiculous. They said that mankind would never be able to go beyond the Earth's envelope. Well, they put men on the moon. They said if you cooked with aluminum, you get cancer. It didn't happen. They said so many ridiculous things.
Sputnik was the signs from the heavens.
What was that?
The first satellite that the Russians put up in 57, I think it was.
Sputnik,
yeah, that was for signs and wonders from the heavens. It was in, in one of the studies from the scriptures.
Oh, it's just the scriptures, yeah.
I think it was from the,
Wasn't the great serpent a steam locomotive or something crazy like that?
The Leviathan.
Yes.
From Hoboken.
This precisely goes back to your point that if we had known these kinds of things, we would have never joined this nonsense.
Yeah.
I didn't join. I was born.
Who in their right mind would have joined something if they had known this is what these people were talking about? None of us. You have to be
I didn't have a choice.
Mm-hmm. Well, but my point is, your parents wouldn't have gotten involved had they known what this really was. So it wouldn't have even been an issue. You see what I mean?
It was different. And when C.T. Russell died, a large number of the Bible students, after Russell's funeral, left. And a certain number of Bible students stayed. And then Rutherford took advantage of the fact that people were hungry in the Great Depression, and they were vulnerable to anything that was giving them what I call hopium.
Wow, good word. That's brilliant. Hopium.
I like that.
That is a good word. I might have to borrow that from time to time.
Yeah.
So you know.
Well, there's two more.
I'm warning you now.
I got this one from a comic book. And Stevie Wonder quoted it the other day, so somebody was reading the comic book to him. They say that you fight war for God, G-O-D, gold, oil, and drugs.
Yeah. Now that I've heard. That I have heard, yes. Yeah. Yeah, so, it's amazing the impact that this organization, and this is not the only one, the earth is littered with them, And like you said, they get you hooked on it. You finally realize that it's nonsense, and then it's half your life getting away from it. It's just, in my opinion, religion has really done a tremendous disservice to society. Just my opinion.
Oh yeah,
They might be right about that aluminum pot not being healthy, but the one thing they were sure right on is religion is a snare and a racket.
They get that right.
Exactly. They just forgot to include one religion, namely themselves.
Oh, one more. Black's Law Dictionary, a corporation is a person.
Yep.
So when they bamboozle us with the idea that they're speaking for Jehovah, a corporation is a person under Black's Law Dictionary.
Yes.
Yes, because you can go to a company's house in London and sign the corporation limited company.
I hope the audience realizes. I'm sorry. I hope the audience realizes that every time you say Jehovah wants us to do this or Jehovah wants us to do that, they don't mean Jehovah. They mean the governing body. The governing body wants you to sell your Kingdom Hall, or governing body wants you to build a quick builder or whatever. Governing body wants you out service. It's crazy.
David's playing with his white stick because he's blind.
Oh,
leading the blind.
What an idiot that guy.
Well, I don't think he's blind. I think these governing body guys, all 8 of them, I think they know that they're lying. They absolutely know that they are. And they're con men. They're professional con men. I watched, I don't know his name. He's not a governing body member. He's a helper to one of the governing bodies. He says, we're not going to apologize if we didn't get a date. Exactly right. Well, you know, if we're supposed to come, Armageddon was supposed to come in September 75, and it came in October. Well, yeah, all right, fine. You didn't get it exactly right. They've been off for over a century.
To your point, Brother Borghi, here's the other thing. When he made that statement, he then followed that up by saying, we don't have to apologize. We don't feel the need to apologize every time we don't have something just right. We understand that this is just how God operates. They blame this on God, as if God gave us a date and then he somehow changed his mind. It's not us, it's God. You know, we're just the middleman relaying the message. Don't yell at us. The whole purpose, in my understanding of Jehovah's Witnesses, is that you were supposed to go out and witness against all the bad things that are said about God. But here you are being complicit in it.
Well, absolutely. The scriptures tell us that God can't lie. So if God gives a wrong date, then that's a lie. Well, it's like God is lying. It's a damn Watchtower.
Yeah, and Hurd has made a similar comment in one of his talks within the last, because I've been gone for 6 years. So within the last 6 years, in one of his videos, he made the same type of remark, basically blaming things on God. And I'm just looking like, you guys can't see that these people can't even take responsibility for their lies. They're going to blame God or put it off on God. This is how God operates. Wow. Wow.
Stefan, you just this conversation is incredible, because it reminded me, my wife has a conversation with, sometimes you bump into witnesses who don't know you, but you realize that they're actually witnesses and they don't know that you're out. And so apparently my wife was telling me that she was on the bus one time and she realized that this person was a witness. So they struck up a conversation, and then my wife was telling this person, do you realize that they made these prophetic statements categorically and they got it wrong? And she asked the sister, the active witness, whose fault is it? And is it God's fault? Is it Jehovah's fault or the governing body's fault when they make a prediction and it's wrong? Guess what the sister said? Apparently, it's Jehovah. Jehovah's at fault. And I'm like,
wow.
And then she actually stopped herself apparently and thought, what am I saying? And then the conversation apparently ended. But like, can you see that they just you blame God? But you know, it used to be shoot the messenger, don't shoot the message. Now it's shoot the incredible.
Yeah. Incredible. Yeah. It's just like you said, do you hear what you're saying? I talk to witnesses from time to time, and I'll say, do you hear what you're saying? And I don't, you know, that's what brainwashing is. No, they really can't even process it.
Well, that's why I'm reading this book, because it's like there's a button, and on some of these people, if you push that button, they will spit out a paragraph. So you're not really having a conversation with them. You're getting a witness paragraph from a book somewhere.
Script.
Right.
Script. Thank you.
I'll tell you how I used to see that firsthand. When that last Bible came out, the silver one, I think we call it the Silver Slug or something. But when that Bible came out, I noticed at least a dozen times where brother would call for a scripture to be read. I'd walk a microphone over, or I'd be doing the stage or whatever, but the microphone would go to a person. The person would start reading, but they weren't actually reading. From memory, they were reciting this verse, because you know how often Watchtower reads the same verses over and over again. They would have the book open, looking at it, but they're reciting as it was worded in the previous biblical edition. You're looking at the new Bible, and the wording, of course, is different. So we'd all wonder, is this person reading the right scripture? So then the person conducting the meeting would say, excuse me, brother, are you reading the right verse? You know, such and such. And he said, yeah. And then we would realize over time, they were actually just bringing this forth from memory, because you've heard it so many times. I must have seen that about a dozen times. And I used to just think, I couldn't even really process it, but I'm like, what is going on here? Like, you have the book open and you're looking at it, but you're not actually reading that. You're reciting this verse from memory. But you think in your mind, you're actually reading it in real time from this Bible, and you're not. And the person would be so dumbfounded. They'd look at you and they'd say, well, what's wrong? And then and the brother would say, you're not reading the verse. Yeah, I am. I'm reading the verse such and such. And the brother would finally say, just go ahead and read. And they wouldn't even get right then and there what they had done. They might figure it out later. They might not ever figure it out. It was just amazing. Sorry.
You know, if you take a Bible
with Memorial last week, they took out the words take, eat on both of the scriptures.
Wow.
What word was that? They took out?
Take and eat.
When when they pass the emblems, they pray over them.
Right.
And so they used the whole scripture except for the first two words, the verbs take, eat. And then with the second emblem, they did the same. They read that scripture and they took out the words take, eat.
I wouldn't be surprised if the next translation will be pass on. You know?
They just swap it. Rick Farron said in his news segment that in Africa they've got one group where they're not even letting them touch the plate.
Yeah, crazy. But that's one of the things that I realized actually on this point about the translation. It's such a deviously devilish translation. As we know about Johannes Grieber and the other things, but seems like every new edition and edited, it seems to get worse and worse. Like the square brackets are taken out of all other things are created in Colossians and so on. So when a person who's not had any grounding in any kind of translations of the Bible before, or has no kind of study in the Bible or any translations, and you pick up a New World Translation for the first time, the silver one or you're in trouble, because there's no way. You're thinking you're reading the Bible. And there's no way of being able to, unless you have the kind of sense to say, well, let me check the King James Version or another translation. But most witnesses won't do that. And that's what got me.
Really, YouTube is what they took out.
Yeah.
Look at Matthew. Look at Matthew, the 8th chapter. It doesn't start with verse 1. It starts with verse 11. They've taken all those verses out.
They took it all out.
Mm-hmm. If you don't have a grounding in
Also,
something, if you're a Baptist background or something, you're in trouble. I didn't come from a biblical schooling before. I had no reference to it. I was a secular guy. I didn't have any clue about the Bible at all. I used to say, why can't he just speak in plain English? These and thous and thou. I didn't understand any of it. And I was young as well. So I lapped up the doctrine of the what it's so logical. It's self-contained. It's logical. It makes sense. But I didn't have a reference. If I had some grounding, life grounding as well, I would have had a better chance of being able to compare it. But it got me young. They got me in my middle teens.
If you want to hear something sad, Rick and I were at the farm, Bethl Farm, when they released the Silver Sword, and we took a tour of the library at the Bethl. And I said, "Oh, where are your Bibles?" Because we were in the library. I have 24 translations, different kinds, different whatever. But do you know how many Bibles they have, different types of translations at Bethl? They have 3 different translations. 3.
That's it?
That's it.
Wow.
You should see the Bible section. It's pitiful. I have more Bibles sitting next to my bed table. You can't believe
That's
it.
so that people can't see that they've changed the Bible. Because ever since I was a little kid, the brothers and sisters in my neighborhood would tell me, your religion has changed the Bible. I've been hearing that as long as I can remember. And I would always say, oh, no. And if we did change it, we made it better. We took it back. And they were like, no, you guys changed the meaning and the definition to fit your teaching and not the other way around. And I remember the last time I heard that, I was in service not too far from where I live. And it was a Sunday. I knocked on a door. Where I live, there's a lot of actual African families as well as African-American, Latino, everything else, but actual African families. And this woman opened the door in her native garb, and I could hear singing, and it was live singing. And I looked past her, and they were conducting church in the living room living room of their home. And I said, "Oh, excuse me. It seems like I came at a bad time." They all stopped and zeroed in on me, and I thought to myself, "Oh my God!" So they all came for me, right? They're all at the door, and so I tried to do my little presentation, and the lady just pushed right past that, and she started peppering me with questions. And one of the things that she told me was, your organization has changed the Bible. You need to get out of that organization. They're not teaching truth. They've changed the Bible. Now, that was the one time when I heard that, and instead of just letting it roll off, my chest, so to speak, it stuck with me. And I said to myself, I really believe there may be something to this. And I never let that thought go. That was always in the back of my mind. And when I finally did wake up and started reading other translations, and I went to BibleHub.com because it's just so easy to compare, 30 Bible translations right there on the fly. And I said to myself, holy cow, we have definitely changed the Bible.
Yeah.
Well, can you imagine those
give
poor
the Silver Sword a little credit. The appendix.
Scriptures in Revelations, it says if you change the Bible in any way, you're going to be cursed. And certainly the Watchtower is cursed because it's loaded with hypocrisies and lies and perversion. It's a very, very sick organization.
I'll tell you one thing.
I have
was
a friend
huge fan. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, you were about to say something about the appendix. Don't forget that.
What?
You were saying something about the appendix of the Silver Bible.
Oh, yes. I have a dear friend who's written the definitive biography of Tudor England of a man named John Dee. And it is a splendid book. And this gentleman is a scholar. He has about 15 Bibles and a lot of other rare and occult texts as well. And this is a splendid book that he wrote. and it's all about Tudor England and John Dee.
I've heard that name.
And
I've heard that name, yeah.
yes. And so I'm reading in the appendix of the Witness Silver Sword, they had a little appendix in the back, which Bibles often have maps and appendix. So I'm looking there, and in Part B of the Silver Sword appendix, they have E-I-O. Now, E-I-O was the vowels in between the tetragrammaton. And it's a very secret magical thing that's rarely noted. And it was of great, great interest to European pagans and occultists. So I thought, bingo, somebody's been studying at the Metropolitan Museum of Art or the New York Library or something. Somebody knows something up there. So they're keenly aware of everything they print, and they are trying to deceive us on purpose in every possible wicked way.
Yep.
They're
Do you know what I
really
don't
evil
understand?
because evil is life backwards. They're not concerned for our life. Everything they say is reverso.
I just want to say one thing. Sorry, everyone. I just can't understand the people in the writing departments who come across, whose job it is to research the controversies, or they come across Karloff and Johnson's research back in the day. I cannot understand those people because they are given the opportunity to explore and they have exposure to all these things, and they still stubbornly. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Just goes to show that they're not honest, and they want to stay in the comfort of the lie in their positions, then have the discomfort of actually standing for truth. They don't want to give up their places or their titles and so on. So it's just wicked. I just don't understand that mentality. I really don't.
That's a really good
They
point.
get a free condo, they get catered food, and they get a $65 silk tie.
But that's a real good point that your brother brings out. You know, it's something on the writing staff. We all believe when we read the Watchtower in a way, it came right from Jehovah God. So you didn't challenge anything. You didn't, get deep into it. But the thing you have to realize is that even people who are on the writing staff, they're putting together, let's say, a Watchtower. And they argue like crazy. And they vote on what paragraph they want to put in or how they're going to word it. There's no Holy Spirit. These brothers that write, they argue. They sit at a table and they go around and around and around till they get what they want, and then they put it out as if that is inspired, which it is not. These brothers are not inspired, and as everybody knows who listens to my voice right now, that the Watchtower is not inspired. If there is any kind of inspiration, it comes from Satan the devil. Because he's the father of lies, and that's all the Watchtower does is lie.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
I remember being raised up, and you guys probably heard the same thing too. Watchtower used to always teach there's only two organizations on the face of the earth. There's God's organization, and then there's the devil. So the first time I read where they said we're not inspired of God, I thought to myself, well, if you're not being inspired by God, and you're so set there's only two organizations, and you can only be a part of the other organization.
And if you were in my congregation, Steph, we would have got on. I'm telling you.
Oh, for sure, no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
When I saw the first season of Mad Men, all I could think of with that soap opera and the advertising agency in New York, all I could think of was that must be what it was like to be at Bethl. Because everything had a meeting, and then they had a 3-martini lunch, and then they were trying to sway the opinion some other way and influence some other minds, and how many readers they had. It's just Madison Avenue. It's Mad Men.
Can I ask a question to everybody? I somewhere in the back of my mind, I got this reference, and I'm not sure if it's true or not. I heard this. I don't know if it was one of Ray Franz's books, but somebody said somewhere, and I can't remember where it was from, but it said that there was a green room or somewhere where if you can argue amongst yourselves, but when it comes out of this room, it becomes truth. That statement, I think, is in one of Ray Franz's books. But apparently, as you said, they would argue amongst themselves, but it's like, okay, get all of this confusion down, but once it leaves this room, it's truth.
Yep.
And
I remember reading that.
Somewhere,
yeah,
I don't know.
I read that too.
And again, I use the margarine arguments because Time magazine about 6 years ago had butter on the cover and said how we've all been bamboozled about margarine for about 60 years. So we thought that was truth. So they come up with something, and because it's in print or because it's on a video now or a website, the power of the fact that it's been published, people put credence in that. Now, in real journalism, which I was a part of back in the day, you had to have 3 sources on anything that you printed in a decent newspaper. But they've never gone with that. They just print because I say it is. They've never had a sourced article in the hundreds of years that they've published.
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right. Is it
Artsy, sorry, Artsy Kim GUSA in the chat just said it's a 6th floor of Bethel. Must be where they make their final decisions in Bethel. She says the 6th floor.
Well,
I'm
you're right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's the writing staff is on the 6th floor, so the writing staff can argue like crazy on an upcoming Watchtower article, but then they sift through it, and then when it comes out on the 6th floor, then it becomes right from Jehovah God himself.
That's it.
They get the final WhatsApp thumbs up from heaven, and then they print it.
Well, listen, it's 1 o'clock, and I've got a service in the morning at 10. Rick's leaving the lines open, evidently, so you guys can keep on talking. I want to thank the audience for coming in on the Connie and Dick show, and say God bless. Take care.
Thank you,
Dick.
Yep.
Before you leave.
Night all.
Yes.
Good night.
Good night. Before you leave, Dick, I want to read something.
Go ahead.
I don't usually do internet research and then read it. Yeah. But this is about what we were talking about way before. This is not in the weeds on tax stuff, but this is the vow poverty thing. I had looked at some of the comments in the chat, and I thought, wow, look where those comments are. But this is from a book that the Bethelites are given called Dwelling Together in Unity. And when they leave Bethel, they have to turn it back in. All right. So this is about that vow poverty. This is the basically what I remember. All right. For your spiritual blessing, certain rules are set in regard to Bethel service and secular work. Members of the religious order are required to take a vow of obedience and poverty. Thereafter, you should not engage in secular employment without permission while you are under this vow. While taking personal time away, you are released from your vow as it applies to secular work. However, there is no release from the vow during evenings or weekends of the regular week of Bethel activity. To work secularly on an evening or a weekend, at least 1/2 day of personal time must be used. And that's basically the part that applies. The rest of it is material possessions don't bring lasting happiness and all that kind of stuff. That's exactly what I was saying earlier. You know what I mean?
Well, I appreciate the clarification. Where I got my knowledge from, I was watching YouTube, and they did something on Stephen Lett owning a lot of property. And the person who was doing the video alluded to the fact that at Bethl, if you serve at Bethl, you're taking a vow of poverty. Oh, but excuse me.
I know.
Yeah, I'm just so blocked up right now. I'm forcing every sentence. But
yeah,
I want to thank you, audience,
about secular employment. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
No, thank you so much. Well, folks, I'm going to call it a night. If you guys want to stay on, by all means, please do. And like I said, tomorrow's Easter, and we're really looking forward to the church services. Me and Connie will go if she's feeling up to it. And both me and Connie love you all. And thank you for coming on the program. God bless and take care. Good night.
Good night.
Yeah.
So, Pixie, why do you say the music at Notre Dame was so wonderful? What was it?
It was especially wonderful because, well, I told you what happened with the pipe organ when they had that beautiful reopening after the fire. The acoustics weren't what I remembered because I went there, when I went to Paris, I went there specifically because of the acoustics, because for thousands of years they had a dirt floor.
Good night.
And
so,
tiled and beautiful.
See, why do you say the music at Notre Dame was so wonderful? What was it?
It was especially wonderful when they had the opening. Well, I told you what happened with the pipe organ when they had the first reopening of it. It was funny because this guy, everybody was saying, well, the acoustics is not the same. And then on camera, this guy walks up to the organist and pushes the button that makes it great again. And so they fixed the organ. Then they told the vocal people where to stand again. And the pieces they had today were just phenomenal. And it was really good.
Where'd you see this?
It was on YouTube.
Oh, wow. Was the music very Catholic?
And not to my ear. It was very modern, and it was the beautiful acoustics of Notre Dame, and the tones that come down from that wooden ceiling, and it's fully restored now in every way.
Sounds wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, you should watch it on YouTube. It was spectacular.
What was the program? What was going on?
It was, I think they got a new baptismal font, and it was part of the Easter week. I guess they'll have some more tomorrow. But what was so funny when they had the opening of it, these guys from Rome were there, and the French staff, all the cardinals and whatnot, they had these beautiful white Chanel-looking outfits that were made to match the building. And so these Roman guys, they came from the Vatican to greet them and congratulate them. And the French guys looking at him like, why are you here? The century-old conflict between what French Catholicism is and what Roman Catholicism is, it's kind of funny. They're all one thing, but they got their own thing there in France.
Well, I didn't want to stop anybody from talking. Stefan and Maverick were talking up before, and now they got quiet. I hope I didn't.
Maybe they're gone.
Mess them up. Well, I'm sorry. Well, that stuff that they were talking about the sky in at the time of Jerusalem's desolation.
Mm-hmm.
That was fascinating, and it almost sounded like that thing that's closely related to astronomy, just in identifying where things were in the sky. I'm sorry about my phone. Do you know what I'm saying? There's a very busy time around here. Okay. Sorry.
Well, where did Stefan go?
Stefan, you there?
I guess that.
Okay. So, Bixie, okay. Since you're on the phone right now, a couple of years back you mentioned a double meridian. I think I know the city you're talking about.
Yeah, that's where I live.
Am I okay? So what does that? What in your mind? What does that do to you? Do to your?
Well, see, a friend of mine in college, he did a chart for me, and he had me uptown instead of downtown. So my chart wasn't accurate. Not that we want to believe in those things, but if we're going to have one done, so I'd love to have one done with the meridian correct on it.
But it's not that large. I don't understand how.
We have what's called Meridian Park right in town. Is Meridian Park, and so I had 3 different astrologers tell me that there's 2 different ephemeris in that town. So rather than ask me where I was born, he made the assumption that I was born in the very fancy hospital toward Maryland. And I wasn't. I was born in the other hospital next to the magic shop.
It still sounds like it's so close. Did the other ones who did your chart, did they say it makes a big difference?
They did. I've had 3 people tell me it makes a big difference because Meridian Park runs right through town. So I'd love to find somebody that knows how to chart one.
The reason why I'm asking all of this is because a lot of times when did they do a manual? Did they do it manually or did they use computer?
It was before computers had that sort of thing.
Oh.
And the old books had the double ephemeris in the old books. So, but I've prospered in my life. I've done well. I don't need to.
So basically your problem.
Well. But the thing is
they put you on the wrong side of town.
Yeah, I was on the right side of town because they had better technology there. I lived because I was at the better hospital, but it wasn't in the ritzy neighborhood. The better hospital was downtown.
Yeah. You know, there was a woman. Let me tell you some of the guesses that I did recently. I feel so bad that I'm talking about this and not about what you guys were talking about a few minutes ago. I hope I'm not offending you.
No.
Okay. There was, let me try to think of some of these things. There was a woman who was talking about her gambling. And she was talking about her success rate. And out of nowhere, I said, "Are you a Sagittarius?" And she said, "Yes, I am." I don't know if I told you about the the bus stop. Have I ever
No.
told you about that? All right. I'm sitting at the bus stop and in a very busy part of town. I don't have to do a long ride, but I'm there. And a woman sits down next to me. She's kind of middle-aged. And I'm going to say the race. She was a black woman. And I'm going to refer to her as Lady A. And then another woman was sitting on the other side of her. I'll call her Lady B. Lady A was advanced middle age, let's call it. And Lady B possibly was advanced middle age too. She was a white woman. And her hair was kind of big, and it had, she had mousse or some kind of gel that made it stand up. And she had a scarf around her head, kind of paisley, and her skirt was above her knees, kind of paisley. This is Lady B. And I think she had some kind of fancy shoes on. And she asked the question, and so she got up to see the bus schedule on the outside of the shelter. And Lady A said, some people need to act their age. And so then I said, oh no. I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, you see how she's dressed. She needs to act her age. And I said to Lady A, no, she might just be a Gemini. And so the woman...
I was thinking about those, some kind of fancy shoes myself.
Yeah. So then, I just looked at the chat. Did I master that piano Rachmaninoff piece? No, not yet. I started working on it again this week. Okay, so Lady B went back and sat down, the one with the scarf and everything. And so we start talking about the bus, and I asked her, which bus are you waiting for, Lady B? And I look on my thing, and it's not coming. And I said, but sometimes a bus won't show up, so it could be closer. And so then another woman comes up, Lady C, and she's looking at us, chit-chatting. I looked at Lady B, and there were some sparrows on the ground. And I noticed Lady B was looking at the sparrows. Lady A wasn't even aware that they were there. And so I said, Lady B is looking at those birds. She's really interested in them. Maybe she really is a Gemini. So her bus comes all of a sudden, and she gets up to get on the bus. Now, we had been talking, so we were all kind of knowing each other. And I'm dying to know. And so she's in the line, and there's a crowd of people, and she's getting close to that door. And so I said, were you born around the end of May to the end of June? And she shook her head, yes. And she turned and went in the bus. And then I said, are you a Gemini? And she shook her head, yes. And she went into the bus. Lady C said, how did you do that?
That's good. That's good. Well, there's a whole book and maybe a documentary. I don't know. A friend of mine, her husband plays in the symphony in Baltimore, and I've known her forever, and she's older than I am. And she was in this book of these fashionable older people. Have you seen that whole trend where these older people really style? It's a thing, and they're in clubs with each other. I mean, you've got groups of 6 and 7 older people, and like the gentleman might have a lime green suit and matching shoes, and the lady's got the fancy shoes and the hat that match, and I mean it's all like new stuff. It's not somebody being older and creative and mismatched and a little wacky. We're talking people that spent for outfits, but they're all like over 70. This book was amazing, and my friend is in the book. Where'd you go? You're gone. I guess the show is over. Good night.
Pixie? Pixie? No, Pixie's gone. I was muted. Pixie, come back in. Pixie's gone. Artsy Kim, did you see that? I got cut off. You know Carol Stanhope? I see what you're saying and I understand. I do sometimes try to guess or feel an inclination to guess what a person's sign is, Carol. And the expected success rate is 8.3%. Carol Stanhope, the expected success rate of guessing a person's sign is 8.3%. But I find that based on how people are acting, I'm guessing them 60% of the time. So whether I